Okay, good afternoon. Let's get started with the work session. It's April 23rd. Time is little past 4 p.m. Several items on the agenda today. Attendance, looking at the room, Director Hart, Director Nelson, Director Hafley, Director Carey, Director Jenkins, and I saw Director Bankus is also here, and Director Malpakam. So all 7 board members present in person in the boardroom, and Superintendent Gall is here along with his team to discuss the items on the agenda. The first item on the agenda today is the preliminary budget development assumptions, and this is the time of the year that we look into our budget for the upcoming year, 2025, 2026. So I'm going to start by providing some overall context to the community for this budget discussion. I know Treasurer Nelson has also been working intricately involved with a lot of this budget work, and she can supplement and provide some additional details and then turn it over to Superintendent Gall and his team. The TAG budget subcommittee has also been collaborating on this effort, so thank you for the work that you guys do. And then we'll follow that with board discussion, input, and questions. So starting providing that context about this budget, early on, when you look at the state funding for this year, early on the board was informed during our legislative updates that at the state level, there was a budget shortfall or deficit, and the board was informed that we should not count on significant new money coming into our general district budget from the state level. And that, combined with potential uncertainties at the federal level, the funding for school districts in general for the 2025-26 school year has been a little bit bleak and discouraging, to use that word. And that is reflected in the conversations that are happening in school districts throughout the state of Colorado. Many school districts are looking at 1 to 2% pay raise for next year's compensation for their staff. Speaking for the D11 school board specifically, our board priorities are clear. It's captured on the banner displayed in the boardroom. It's to improve student outcome. To deliver on that promise of improved student outcome and increased academic achievement, that means it requires investment in high quality instruction in every single classroom. So the overall guidance from the board to the superintendent and his team as this budget was developed was simple. Increase our investment closer to students in the classroom, prioritize schools and classrooms in the budget development process while supporting our teaching staff with robust compensation and benefit. Increase the overall percentage in the budget pie, and this has been shown in the past in board meetings. The amount of money that is allocated to instruction, increase that pie chart roughly says 58 to 60% of our money has been going to instruction over the last 20 years, and that amount hasn't changed very much. General guidance was that over the next several years, let's invest more money into instruction. With limited new money coming in, the only path forward to achieve the outcome of increased investment in classroom is to realign our spending in other areas and departments and reinvest that money into our teachers and classrooms. The preliminary budget that is coming in front of the board is reflective of that desire by the board to maximize investment in instruction and classrooms and prioritize our teaching staff. In last year's budget, there was a realignment of central administration, which resulted in savings of roughly $4.2 million.
Central office is about
$3.5 million. And this year's budget, as we will discuss it soon, has another savings of about $3.2 million. So over the past 2 years, the footprint of central admin has been realigned for a cost savings of approximately $7 million. I mentioned that specifically at the outset of this conversation because when you engage with the community, there is a perception that central administration is growing. That is not a fact. That is contrary to the information that has been presented to the board. And I just want to foot stomp on that and mention that the board has consistently aligned allocation of resources with its fundamental priority, that's to improve student outcomes. With that, Treasurer Nelson, do you want to provide any more context to what's coming up before I turn it over to Superintendent?
Yeah, I think I'll just add that we are intentionally shifting our resources to be closer to the mission of District 11, which is the education of children and supporting our students. And so there have been very intentional moves made in conversations with the superintendent and our deputy superintendent as to how do we increase our investment in instruction, and while recognizing the challenges of declining enrollment. And we've seen that our schools over the years have felt that impact, and there's a forcing mechanism there of reducing staffing at our school level, but the rest of the system does not have that forcing mechanism. And so when I believe Dr. Comfort will have a chart or a graph showing sort of staffing to enrollment, that's evidenced in this graph. And so we're just at this time really trying to right size the district and at the same time shifting resources to also invest in instruction more so. So take it away, Dr. Comfort.
Superintendent Goff, first detail.
I just couldn't be more excited. I want to bring some joy back into the room at a time when the state is talking about shortfalls and inequities. Our district, because of several years of hard work under the board leadership and particularly Director Nelson as the treasurer, in asking us to be thinking more long range instead of just constantly reacting, we have been shifting our priorities to the classroom. Last year, we had about a $5 million shortfall, of which the traditional solution would be to cut 50 teachers. We said no to cutting teachers because the number one way to student achievement is access to high quality instruction. We found those efficiencies at central office. If you go back and look at the tapes from the first budget in the 23 school year that we built together, we promised, myself as a superintendent to our treasurer, Director Nelson, that we would every year find several $1 million worth of efficiencies outside of the classroom. We have done that, we've exceeded that expectation, and that allows us to be, I think I can say this, the only district in El Paso County that's looking at a more than 5%, and I think we are offering a double-digit compensation package for those people closest to the classroom. Again, using language that we used last year, the concentric circles around the student. We value every employee in District 11. I want people to hear that. However, the closer you are to the student, the more important you are to the overall mission of what we are. We are a teaching and learning institution. If you are wondering about where your space is here, please, we still have vacancies unfilled for this year. Find your way back into the building, back into changing the vector for a student's life. And remember, our budget is not what it was last year. It is never what it was last year. It is solely dependent upon the number of children that attend our schools, both traditional schools, charter schools, and innovation schools. What happens in our state is people say, you're changing my budget from last year. Nope, you have less children than you did last year, so your budget has changed. And I know that causes consternation and changings at the adult level. There are ways for us to overcome that. We've done a great job over 3 years in exiting enrollment averaging. We no longer are worried if the state has a 5-year, a 4-year, or a 3-year plan for that, because we add students in District 11. This year, there was a reporting error. We have message from CDE that recognizes that we did not report our 973 universal pre-K students, which is why the newspaper says District 11 lost 400 kids this year. We actually added 473 kids when you add that 973. We're funded for all the children we have, but from the count perspective, people want to say we are losing children. We have not lost children in the 3 years that I have been here. And we will enter into a phase in about 1.5 years where we will be dependent upon the small changes in neighborhoods and households. But we are bringing people back, we are being more reflective of the choices of parents, and that's what our budget represents today. One way to student achievement, access to high quality instruction. We have the best instruction in El Paso County. We are starting to differentiate how we pay above and beyond how other teachers are paid. And I hope that if other districts are paying attention, everybody wins if we all start thinking about putting money into the classroom. Dr. Comfort, to your masterpiece.
Good evening, board. I will say I'm very excited to present our preliminary budget tonight. I'll foot stomp a couple of things that have already been said. We have transitioned from budget driving strategy to strategy driving budget, right? That is a key, necessary move that had to happen in order to see different outcomes as a school district. That came under the board and superintendent's direction. And I'll foot stomp, if you look at the plan tonight, in every single facet, you will see teaching and learning matters most. It does not mean there are not parts of the organization that are not doing great work. Everybody in this organization is doing great work. But what happens between a teacher and their student is the most critical. To what Director Nelson said, that is our core business. And so this budget recognizes that. So we're gonna go through a few things tonight, but I do wanna set some general context. Number one, the graph that we have grown used to. This is updated to take into account our decisions in our budget last year, as well as the assumed decisions in this budget. And so what you'll see in that graph again is a significant change in enrollment over time versus staffing, right? Staffing staying pretty steady, in fact growing a little bit, while enrollment significantly declines. You will see over the last couple of years, those two lines are now starting to trend towards each other instead of away from each other. That's good. I want to be really, really clear on that top line. When you see a reduction in staff, you'll see that that line is not very steeply negative. That's because we are not cutting in schools. The fastest way I can make that line change is by saying, board, you approve a 25-to-1, 30-to-1, and 33-to-1 ratio, and I'm going to take all schools back to that. As I shared last year, that is over 100 positions. That would be over 110 positions this year, right? The reason that that is only steadily declining is because we are not doing that on the backs of schools. We are doing that through our reorganization strategically here at central office. You will also see our enrollment, our overall enrollment is growing. It is projected again to grow next year. You'll see again on the right a couple of things. This will be the third year in a row we are projecting an enrollment increase overall. Central administration reorganizations for 3 years in a row. I want to be really clear. There can be a narrative and news story here about other things. What we're doing is aligning the resources we have to the strategy of the district. That is the most important thing that we have control over. That's what we're doing. And to what the board president said earlier, we're prioritizing school resource allocations. You tasked me with that. You said very clearly, focus on schools, and so that's what we've done. We do have that performance data right there. And then to what the board president said a little bit on the bottom, we could do what many school districts across the state right now are doing and say that this is a tough budget year. I would always love for there to be more recurring money. What I would say is the state is doing their fair share right now. If you remember those models of new finance formula money that I showed, they could have gone as low as $150,000 of new money to District 11 and as high as $6 million. While we didn't get all the way up to that $6 million, we definitely got a lot higher than $150,000. The state is doing their part. It is our responsibility to be more effective with the resources that we have. Director Carey?
Not a question or a talking point, just a very quick data thing. When you look at the x-axis for this slide, don't misinterpret this as years where you're looking at that last data point as 2022. This is the past 22 years.
Correct.
The way to interpret that final data point is the most recent budget year,
Yep.
and then you increment backwards from
That's
that.
correct.
So
Yep. So basically 2025 to 2003. Yes, that is correct. Okay. So 3 primary strategies or 3 primary demands from the Board of Education with regards to the budget. First and foremost, all new money goes to compensation. I scoffed when you said that because I knew we would do that easily. We've done that the last 2 years, far beyond 100% of new money from the state we've given towards compensation. I knew we would do that again this year. I will say that is not common across school districts, right? You will not find very many school districts that will say all new money is going towards compensation. We'll show you tonight where not only did we give all new money, we went beyond that again. You also said again, prioritize schools, and to the graph we see on the right, what we talked about last year is starting to make that strong transition from more money spent or to more money spent on instruction. This kind of theoretical 60 to 70%. Here's what I'll say. I can do that tomorrow night. I can bring you back a budget this year that already moves us to 70% simply by changing how we code our budget, right? So when you hear district to district comparisons, if I coded all of our teaching and learning coaches and LTEs and custodians, because right now they're funded centrally even though they're at schools, if I took all of those and made those school resources, that would jump that number up, right? We can play with the numbers and coding all that we want, but the essence of what you asked me to do is to change how we allocate resources in the district. So we're not going to do that by changing how we code. I'm going to stay consistent with how we've coded those positions for the last 2 decades. We're going to genuinely change how we allocate our resource. Okay, you've heard this from me before, but we'll speak to it again. We have 3 strategies when we think about this. And I will say, I think that we're unique in this. Many systems think about one strategy, and that is that first strategy. Where do we allocate new money? You will see that we're getting roughly $5 million from the School Finance Act this year. That sounds like a lot of money. It's not a lot of money when you think about a system of our size, but we're getting $5 million. The compensation package that I'm going to show you later tonight, it's going to cost the system $8.4 million when you think about recurring salary and benefits. So right there, we've already gone well beyond the all new money from the state goes to compensation, right? So allocating resources is our first step. The second step that is unique to District 11 in many ways is our realignment of existing resource. We talk a lot about what we're going to do with new money. I take it through a whole process with the DAC Budget Subcommittee, but we never talk about the remaining 98% of $350 million. We are looking at how we are reallocating existing resource. A couple of strategies that we've used this year is we've looked at some places in our mill levy override where right now the general fund is picking up part of that tab. I'm using some of the inflation money that the board approved in December to kind of cover that gap. That will free up some general fund money for our district, right? Without jeopardizing, that's why I put that little note on the bottom, jeopardizing anything that's in the MLO. We're not cutting class size aid positions that are in the MLO. We've already embedded those into student-based budgets at schools. So we're reallocating. A lot of our reorganizations across central office are about an alignment or a realignment of existing resource to the current strategy. Because remember, strategy drives budget. And then finally, a place that District 11 is very unique is we are going through reductions that showcase what our priority is. So as the board president said, we will again be going through a $3+ million reduction in how our central office budgets are spent. Part of that is staff, part of that is recurring budget, but that is the efficiency work that you've tasked us to do. You've asked us to focus our central office in a way that is not heavy and is focused on the core strategy of the district. So those are the 3 primary things that we've done in this year's budget to get to the overall request of the board.
Dr. Comfort,
Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
You said that the cuts were happening in central administration, not in schools.
Correct.
Are there any roles that are based in schools but technically count as central administration that are being cut?
Are there any roles that are based in schools? No.
Okay.
No.
I think the other way to address that is we believe the realignment through the 3 chiefs and academics will provide better supports for schools. They might look different than somebody says, well, Lauren comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now where's Lauren? Well, now you might get a version of Dr. Carey on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. So we're working our way through that. And we know that change is hard. We're not seeking to harvest, we're seeking to align the staffing to the strategy of the district. And so we know that there have been conversations this week with some of those staff members that we are reclassifying some positions instead of when somebody retires or leaves that we just immediately rehire it. We analyze that through HR and say, what is the need of the system? Is there an opportunity for us to rethink that position and then reclassify it at a pay scale commensurate with that new responsibility? So it's an opportunity more than a risk.
Yeah, I'll just clarify with 2 pieces. I just do want to be clear, we are in never any way trying to find a sneaky way to count something as central, but cut it out of school, right? That goes completely counter to, that's why I said we could solve this through coding alone, but that's not what you actually tasked us to do. But more importantly, just to be clear about one thing, you're going to see a number of central office positions posted in the next couple of days. I want to be clear, those are not new positions. Those are reorganized positions because we have not yet gotten to our full academic strategy. We are making significant progress, But until we get there, until every single teacher can say, I am feeling the level of support that I need, we will continue to evolve our organization to match that need. So I just want to be clear so that we don't get an email in a couple of days like, you said you were cutting, look at all of these new positions. They are not new positions, they are renamed or reclassified positions because we are, again, letting strategy drive what happens in the district.
And glad that you, made that point really clear. There's a letter to the editor today with that misinformation that says we're creating. So we need to reiterate how many times that we are reorganizing. These are not new positions. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, you know, if you've been with us for a number of years, if you just kind of can sit back and look, you'll see how the landscape of our central office has changed significantly. It is a significantly academically leaning focus now. We used to be much heavier on the operational side. There was somebody who was paid a certain amount in all of these positions, and we've countered almost all of that now to the academic side of it. So are we heavier on the academic side? Yes, as we should be as a teaching and learning institution. But we have balanced that with reductions on the other side. So central office has done nothing but reduce over the last couple of years as we've continued to prioritize our focus on schools. Okay, now we'll get into the boring document, the PBDA. So this has a couple of things in it just to highlight. You'll basically see that we're projecting from the state budget about a 2.5% increase. That's about $311 per kid. It will bring our total funding north of $11,500 per student. You'll see that overall our projection for enrollment is up. And then I want to get down to the lower section just to be clear. You'll see that bottom number, that net resource change. So remember, I said we were going to get roughly $5 million from the state. We are getting about $5 million, plus we freed up about $1.3 million of general fund money in backfilling MLO money with MLO money, right? So that's how we get to about $6 million. Let's keep going. Okay, now we get into how we're spending this money. Couple of things. You'll see up at the top, that's where we get to that $8.4 million in total recurring staff compensation, $6.8 million in salary increases, and about just shy of $1.6 million in benefits. Remember, while other districts maybe perhaps are pressing benefit increases down on their employees, the board was very clear about continuing to pay a larger portion of that share in this year's benefits package. We did talk about this. There's some big numbers on the left as we move to a consolidated school-wide program. All of those numbers balance out. It is just us now bringing Title I into the general fund. That money is still accounted for separately. We still track it separately. We still report it to CDE separately. Schools still receive it. But we are significantly reducing the burden of paperwork on schools by moving to a consolidated school-wide program. So that's what you'll see. And then you'll see we only have one new recurring expense, and that is graduation. Graduation is something that happens every year. We should have a recurring expense for it. This has been a significant change. If you were to go back and look at PBDAs over the past years, we used to have a lot new recurring items, more central office positions, more recurring programs. We've greatly reduced that because we've focused our recurring budget on staff compensation. Then you'll see the non-recurring allocations on the right. So starting on the top, you'll see our non-recurring projected non-recurring compensation at just shy of $13 million. So again, the board will provide over $20 million in compensation this year. And then you'll see some of our expenses on the left, or I'm sorry, on the right. That $1.7 million, remember, we do have one overlap here between PeopleSoft and PowerSchool. And so we will pay for that 1 year, then we will get in back as we move on from Oracle and on to PowerSchool. That will not be a continued budget item. We then kind of categorized a number of these things. And so you'll see when this actually comes in the budget build, and obviously the DAC budget subcommittee saw these as all line items, we have a number of items that are focused on peak experiences. These are great experiences for kids. They received overwhelming positive support from the DAC budget subcommittee. I will bring those to you in line item form. For brevity, I've combined those. You'll see as we discussed last time, have set aside a little money for our October true-up for SBB implementation. We will be continuing our staffing stability program that the board approved last year at Adams, Galileo, and Mitchell. Remember, that provides increased compensation as well as increased days for professional development as well as individual work time for those 3 schools in need. We are going through a board election in November, so we have to pay for that. And then you'll also see a combined effort for athletics. That includes, we're going to do some new professional development for coaches. We have to pay for some ice time, and there's a few transportation-related things for athletics. What I want you to notice, though, is all of those expenses, minus the ones we have to do, like I can't not pay for an election, they're all focused on the primary focus of the district, teaching and learning. They are student-focused initiatives. We're not bringing you lots of operational things, asking you to fund them. We are focusing the budget on the primary core strategy of the district. Okay, then I'll go on to the final part. This is where we see then how we balance that out. So you'll see those central office kind of efficiencies at $3.2 million, and then we have confirmed the retirement differential number. I had a placeholder in there of 1.5 million. It's actually going to be a little less at 1.3 million. The number I want you to focus on is that number on the bottom right. Even after we're spending $12 million on employee non-recurring compensation, all of those one-time things, we're still maintaining a sizable fund balance. We're in good shape. Okay, we can continue to fund things as we need to, obviously as that spends down over time, and we hope it does. We hope it spends down because we've hired so much of our staff that we're not saving money in vacancies. That's the goal of the district. But as that spend down, we will continue to size our budget appropriately. Ooh. Can I get into compensation, or do you want to talk about the budget part first, President?
You have some more slides.
I do have a few more slides.
Okay, let's finish.
Okay.
What you have, and then we can open it up for comment.
Okay, so here's what we're presenting tonight. We're presenting 10% compensation packages across the board. They will look differently depending on what your position is, but they are robust. They are significant. Okay, so we are changing how we use our resources for compensation to be more focused on the strategy of the district, which is about being closer to kids. So you'll see that little funny graphic on the left there. There's like a graduation hat, and you see a couple of kids. That's us saying the further on the left you are, the closer to kids you are, therefore you're getting a different compensation package. Okay? So group A is basically teachers. Now teachers includes counselors, teachers includes school-based itinerant staff, teachers includes ELL teachers, it's teachers. And what we're saying there is 4% recurring, 6% non-recurring for 10% overall. So basically what that is, that's 2% to the base, that's steps, that's lanes, that's 1425, that's all of those things that District 11 is used to, with a really sizable non-recurring part of 6% for a 10% overall compensation package. Then we're gonna go to group B. These are school-based positions, so your primary job is in schools, but you're not teaching. And so these are school administrators, these are paraprofessional, paraeducators, these are school admin assistants, these are custodians, these are all of the people who work in a school on a daily basis, but again, they're not doing that primary job of teaching and learning in the same way as a teacher. They're gonna get a 3% recurring compensation package and a 7% non-recurring to get to a total of 10%. Then our third group, non-school-based central office employees across central office, 2% recurring, which is basically a step, and then 8% non-recurring. Okay? So everybody is getting a really sizable compensation package, and this clearly speaks to the priority of the Board of Education and Superintendent, which is we focus our compensation on the people who are the closest to the work that matters the most. We respect and appreciate everybody to the amount of 10%, and we are differentiating in a way that we haven't differentiated before. Okay? So I apologize that it's such small print, but at the bottom, just to put some dollar figures in this, for teachers, that's going to be $4,500 to $7,500 when you take that all into account. $4,500 basically represents the very far top left of our salary schedule, and $7,500 obviously on the other way, but everybody's getting a sizable raise. And so I think that's something that the Board of Education would be proud to say, and it aligns with your mission and vision.
And that's not covering benefits, retirement.
Yes.
Like that's straight,
Yeah.
more cash.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. This 10% package does not include the benefits increase. Remember, the benefits increase was $1.6 million alone. So that is also included. But this is really recurring salary and non-recurring compensation. Okay. This is a little bit more about the benefits, just to kind of build that out. We do have a link in this when we're ready to send this out. Remember, many of our plans are now going to actually save our employees money, and where there are increases, they are very modest. Because again, the board has absorbed a large portion of that cost. And then, Nicole, where's my tool? Yeah.
It's in another link, we just have to
Okay.
switch the link up.
We have created, can we bring that up? Is that okay? Before we open for questions, because we are doing compensation a little different, we have built, it's in beta testing right now, live, but we built a little salary calculator tool for our teachers. So similar to a mortgage calculator, if you put in your existing better than anybody, your step in lane that you'll be in next year, it will auto-calculate, include your non-recurring, and it will give you your new salary amount. So here you'll see we took somebody lane 4, step 7, they moved up a lane and up a step, and so they're gonna go from 56,000 to 65,000. And so again, it's not ready to go live everywhere yet. We will definitely send that out next week when that's ready, but we just thought that it might put each individual more in the driver's seat. We will also communicate numbers that people can call if they need clarification on what their salary will be and what group they fall in. Because I understand it is not as easy as saying all ESPs, all exec pros, we are doing it a little differently. But I just wanted to share that as a little add-on at the end.
So this tool that you have up here, it's going to be something that is going to be shared where teachers can.
Yep.
And we can do the same thing for ESP and etc.
We're hopeful. We are hopeful. We have built it. We're building it for teachers. But yes, yeah, there's a lot of tables there. Yeah, but we are hopeful. But our absolute commitment is it will be available for teachers next week, and then it might be a little delayed for the other employee groups, but we are working.
And we know there are all kinds of nuances to people's pay. Who gets a stipend for this, who gets a thing for that. What we wanted to show folks was the value of what a 4% and 6% non-recurring means to them as an overall. And so still payroll and HR will have that final call on how people make, but for people to understand what it feels like to get that instead of thinking that it doesn't feel like anything. And in comparison, the neighboring districts are, some of those messages have been a little bit opposite.
Yeah, it is very similar to a mortgage calculator. They never guarantee you that mortgage rate. And so we will get very close, but yes, it doesn't include 1425. There's a lot of those add-ons that are real compensation, but it would just be obviously too complex for my brain to manage a tool like that. So, but we did think that it might be a nice add-on for people as they're considering what is coming.
Is it possible to add like a total compensation box so that it can show and the district is also covering this dollar amount for retirement and benefits? I get like maybe that's gonna be super complicated, and if that turns out to be the case, okay. But it could be really interesting for people to understand, like, this is your salary, but your total compensation accounts for para, health benefits, and that's a major cost to the district.
It would be 30% of that in addition, right, basically.
I think we can ask for our ERP development to be able to provide that, as people will have self-service. We had a very similar thing in the military. Here's what you get paid, here's what that equals. And that was a big difference, and it really made you very proud of your relationship with your employer when you saw how much they were picking up.
Right, how much they're really looking out for their staff, and even if it's just like a line that you say that, like 30% of what you're making is now in addition going towards para.
Yeah,
and
I think we could definitely
you know.
figure out a way to communicate the total compensation, because again, that is in the total budget, right? We do pay for it, so.
Okay.
And I believe that's the end of my slides.
Thank you so much. And if we can pull the previous set of slides, and this is a good, pull up the previous one. Go for, that one. That is essentially going to be the information that our staff are going to be interested in knowing. Advantages are going to be, and how the district has prioritized moving resources closest to students as possible. I appreciate those concentric circles and the students at the far left corner, showing that the closer that you are to students, the more that we are trying as best as possible, but when you add up the recurring and non-recurring, it's 10% for just about all staff members. It's the way that it's broken down. Because of the School Finance Act not giving us $5 million, that's what you said, in new monies that we are going to be getting. We are limited in the amount of recurring compensation that we can provide for all our staff, and that's why it's faced in that manner. So with that, I will open this up for the board for questions on anything that was presented in the PBDA. Dr. Karen.
Brandon, would you be so kind as to go back to my favorite graph in the
Yeah.
world? I really want to just foot stomp the context here, which is and please correct me if I say anything wrong, because this is Lauren's world much more than it is mine. School districts in Colorado are basically facing a triple whammy of, for most of them, declining enrollment averaging, loss of ESSER funds and the like, and state funding being in a very dangerous position, right? What did the state legislature walk into at the start of the session? Like a $1 billion deficit, I think? $1.2 billion deficit. And in District 11, right, historically, we've had our own set of troubles. As I've said on many occasions, this graph is financial insanity. You cannot be in a position where your enrollment has declined 30% and your staffing has gone up over the same time interval. That's insane. And in general, right, educational systems and institutions have this problem where you've just seen big growth in administration and kind of associated services in a way that doesn't directly impact the classroom. I think every teacher understands this very well. When I was shown this graph, the very first question I asked was, have class sizes changed in that same time period? Because if this is the result of smaller class sizes, then that seems okay. And I was told, no, class sizes have not changed. Or formula is the same as it's always been. No teacher would say that, they've benefited from a super reduced class over that time period. So again, school districts in Colorado right now are in a very frightening financial position. And I don't want to throw shade at other school districts necessarily. Now you can go back to the 10% slide. But I think it is just absolutely tremendous that Dr. Comfort and the team were able to do this. Other school districts are not anywhere near this set of numbers. Nowhere close. And this is, again, the result of us putting our money where our mouth is. The mission here is education. The mission here is academics. Superintendent Gall's favorite saying in the world, access to high quality instruction. We want to spend dollars close to the classroom. This is what that means. This is what we're about in District 11. So 2 thumbs way up to the team. No questions.
Yeah, okay. Any question, Dr. Rock?
Well, I appreciate your comments, and I know we want to keep things close to the classroom, but I also worry about programs that we might have that are based out of central admin, and you haven't shared with us what that is, and I understand that's gonna be the operations side perhaps, but when I think about it, and I made a little list, like, I don't want us to ignore or lose our investments in some of the things that make our district special, like the DLM Promise. We have the interpreters, we just celebrated CTE and the apprenticeships today, counselors, the future centers, and my concern is that when we're making the cuts, that we lose things that have significant value for engaging our students into the future in particular, even like the world language and peak experience things we support. So if they go away, that to me is less value.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think I can say with 100% confirmation, every item you listed is included in this budget, and probably even more so than it has been in the past. They are now on the front end. The peak experience one includes study abroad. It includes, how much money did we program for VAPA for the first time ever? $400,000. $400,000. We finally gave our visual and performing arts an actual budget at the front of the year instead of mid-year or end of year fallout money. So we've been front loading to that same regard that says, these are the programs that make us different. We are not cutting, we're doubling down and investing in those places. Now, those do require us to think differently sometimes about how they are delivered, But I promise you that they're actually all growing. And we have that list. Are we gonna go through the line by line item or when the MLO,
We will when we present the budget.
when the budget gets presented?
It
You'll
comes
see
as
them there.
non-action.
It does come into account.
You'll see them displayed there.
I would also just add, Director Rott, I know a lot of the conversation is about adding and reducing. That middle category is really important. And you'll actually see, specific to the parts of the organization that you talked about, is now you're gonna see jobs more focused on that instead of legacy to what they were. Now they're gonna be focused on peak experiences. That's literally gonna be in people's job titles and job descriptions to, again, align our resource to our strategy. So I think we're seeing this as an accelerant in moving that work forward. Is not just are we moving budget money in alignment with those things, but we're actually working on positions to make sure that they are focused on getting to those outcomes. So it no longer feels as an add-on for somebody, but it is their core primary work. And so that's what, in all of this, and there's really positive and really challenging parts of any budget bill, that's the part that I'm most excited about, is that realignment work, because there is significant resource that when we align it appropriately, it's unbelievable what we can do for schools. And that's the work that's happening right now.
How many kids are going to Beijing this summer? Is it 6 or 9?
I don't know, a lot. I'm not going.
6 more than what it was last
Yeah.
year, because last year it was 0.
6 more than any other school district I've ever met that they'll send kids to study abroad in Beijing, so. And that's included in the budget.
And that's a paradigm shift as opposed to an add-on that it's incorporated into. It's part of the job. It's not teacher specific or teacher motivated to make this program work. If it's a job title, then people who are fulfilling that job title have that responsibility incorporated into it. It's a paradigm shift that I think is going to take some time to permeate through our whole teaching staff and parents in addition to that. So thank you for making that clear.
Are you done with your questions, Director?
I am curious about fees. I know it came up last night for student fees. And I don't know if we're gonna have a conversation later on whether or not we evaluated student fees if groups that are supporting our students and engaging our students, and again, this might not be quite a classroom, but it is after school activities, before school activities, things that engage our students and keep students here in our district. And so student fees, we had a conversation after the budget subcommittee about how theater, I'm trying to remember, theater here is less costly than say in some other districts, and that's a pro for us.
Absolutely.
But the question might be, after we went through and we prioritized that students wouldn't have to pay fees, are we placing the burden on our families and our teachers to go out and fundraise for the programs? Do they have enough? Have we evaluated that? Is there a plan to evaluate that? Because I'm hearing that they don't have enough funds.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. We were just talking about this with the superintendent today as we were planning to bring our fee and fine discussion to the board. I want to be really, really clear, and I know not many people watch the board meeting, but I wish everybody watched the board meeting for this statement. If you need funding for what you need to do because it's part of your core business, call me. We have mechanisms for that. There's processes to get money, but if you're trying to run a performance and you've always done it and you used fees before and now you have less fees and you're like, maybe I gotta cut this. No, call me. Call me. We have a plan for that. We literally have a whole online tool, but like regardless of any of those things, you just call me and say, Brandon, I've done this for 15 years. This is critical to what we do as a school district, and I guarantee you I will get you money, right? So do we need to continue to evaluate the reduction of fees further and how we continue to build access? The conversation last night was wonderful about we've opened access for kids, but have we somehow, because we charge gate admission, shut down access for some families? That's the next iteration of this, to say, how do we make all of these things that are so core to why kids come to school? They were critical for me when I was in school. How do we make it as accessible as possible? But please, any board member, if you hear anybody at a school and they need money for a program that they have always run and they're in trouble, call me. I promise I will solve the problem. I've had one school reach out to me this year with that, and we got them money within 24 hours. And so we have mechanisms to do that. We are never going to say no to kids. That's what this budget shows, right? Some of those things, those peak experiences about study abroad and all of those wonderful things, those are all opportunities in the past when we could have said no. It's too costly, it doesn't make sense, it should be on a sliding scale, all of those things. The board has made a really clear statement. No, we're about giving that access to families. So surely if we're willing to do that, if you need a performance or you're an athletic thing or it's an art club and you need help, you call me, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and so there's some miscommunication and misinformation. The goal of the findings and fees, no, it was not findings and fees, what's the?
Fines and fees.
Fines and fees,
Yeah.
thank you. We'll just talk about fees, because fines will still exist. If you smash a computer because you're mad at your computer, the family's gonna be accountable for that. We wanna make clubs, we wanna make sports, we wanna make activities free for children to participate without passing the burden. A child that wants to be a three-sport athlete should not be restricted because their parents don't have more money for them to participate in 2 more sports. We believe, when I say the number one way to student achievement is access to high-quality instruction, the things that happen before school, in between class, after school are a part of a high-quality experience in instruction. An engaged student is the goal. We as parents know that sometimes our kids only go to school because of that thing that drives them to be there. And I love when we can sneak the learning in periods 1 through 7 during that time. So I think you'll see, because we are due to bring fines and fees to the board here in a couple of weeks for non-action, because we have to get you to vote on it. But you'll see that the miscommunication has been, well, where's my money? We programmed $400,000 for VAPA for the first time. This is the first time that we've had a director of visual and performing arts who has their own budget to figure out how to spend that. We should not be raising money from families to fix orchestra equipment. That has to be on us. If you happen to be in an orchestra or some other thing that wants to travel abroad for that, we're probably gonna ask you to do a fundraiser for that. But the basic experience of being in a marching band, being on the soccer team, being in the robotics club should be things that are part of what your tax base provides you to go to District 11 schools. Now, for a lot of our families, that's immaterial. But for some of our families, there's gonna be one kid that says, you mean I get to do that and I don't have to go home and ask my mom or dad for money? That might change that child's engagement at school, their commitment to their learning, and maybe there's that next superstar, whether it's Broadway, whether it's in a club, or whether it's a sport, that says that decision by this school district is what gave me the chance. So I think, Director Ott, when you see that come forward, help us understand where that misinformation is existing. I think most of it is internal. If I were a parent, I would be like, oh great, you're running cross country again? I didn't have to pay for it this year? Awesome. Great, I'll see you at the meet on Saturday. Like, it should be almost invisible to parents. There's been some confusion about how that lays out. We're almost there. I think we're down to 1 more year of a very small fee for some of our most expensive activities. But we're excited about that future because, again, high quality instruction is not just the instructional time. Come to D11, believe in D11. It's a place where your tax dollar is going to provide you more opportunities with a focused budget.
Director Ott,
Thank you.
Yes,
Nope, that
are you
does it.
done? Okay, so you heard from our deputy superintendent and our finance officer directly. He guaranteed that if you have these type of concerns, reach out to him. Okay, so we are about supporting classroom instruction and providing that experience that Superintendent Gall talked about for all our students. Any other board members' questions or concerns about the budget that is up there in front of you?
I hope that you hear the passion and excitement that this is about investment. And this work has been very exciting to be a part of, that we're rethinking the structure of District 11 and how we're delivering services differently so that we can use our limited resources to really impact our students, and that we're meeting what the mission of District 11 is all about. And you'll see that we're being aggressive. We have a very aggressive mismatch. We feel comfortable with that because we also are still seeing our fund balance driving up. We're still seeing vacancies. Hopefully we will get to a point where we're be able to hire all of the people that we want to have on staff. And, we'll adjust accordingly in the future. But then again, with this compensation package, we're being aggressive because we're serious about this work. And it is, like I said, I'm so excited to see that we are able to sort of shift the strategy of the district towards really the actual mission and thinking through how to deliver services a little differently and bringing it back to the kids. So exciting.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work that was put into this.
Yes.
And if you can go back to that first slide, Director Carey's favorite slide out there, the one which shows up there. Okay, when you look at that slide up there, 20 years back or so, we had 8,000 more students in our schools. And we were able to support those 8,000 more students with lesser amount of staff without any drop in quality of instruction. I can't speak for what happened 10 years back, but we've lost 8,000 students along the way. But that's what that graph depicts, that there is a discrepancy in the loss of enrollment of students, 8,000 students, while our staffing continues to stay stagnant, or in certain years, we've increased staffing out there. You heard from the superintendent, this is not going to impact the quality of education and support and services our students are going to be receiving in the classrooms. That's not the intent out here. The high quality that District 11 is known for is going to continue out here, but this is right sizing some of our staffing internally at the central admin level so that we can effectively provide that compensation. We can't continue to support what we have in central admin while also supporting our staff, and our mission is to provide that highest quality of instruction in the classroom. That means we need to support our staff, and that's why we are able to provide that high compensation. So an average teacher could be getting anywhere between 4,500 to 6,000, and that's just in the recurring compensation along with the non-recurring compensation that we are able to provide. One other thing that I do want to mention, when you look at the conversation at the state level, what they are talking about is doing away with that 5-year declining enrollment averaging. District 11 was able to proactively plan for that over the last couple of years. So we are, through that declining, District 11 has benefited from that declining enrollment averaging for the last 12 years or so. There was a figure that you shared with the board that the district received about $120 million. Was that 120?
It's about $130 million.
$130 million
Yeah.
over the last decade or so for students who we no longer have in the system. Okay, but we went through that right sizing through the district portfolio model, and we are on the other side of it right now. So when other school districts around the state are scrambling to figure out if the state is going to go away from that 5-year enrollment averaging to 4 and 3 and do away with it in subsequent years, we are well planned, well prepared for what is about to come through. So those are some of the thoughts that come across. Do you have any closing thoughts, Dr. Comfort?
No, I appreciate the feedback. Again, overall budget, this is the most important slide to me, the call from the board to move from 60 to 70. Again, we can do that in a variety of ways, but we're going to do it in a real way. And this is now the second step to that. We started that movement last year. We will continue that this year, and we'll continue it. And again, I hope one year it's that I get $20 million of new money and it's all about pouring that into one side. But until then, we will continue to work on our investment to schools because that aligns with your board priorities. And we will continue to build budgets where we live within our means. That's what the challenge of declining enrollment averaging presents. We are now in a place where we are living within our means, just like we all have to do at home. And so that's what District 11's budget is now and will continue to be.
Okay, Superintendent Gong, any closing comments?
I just really appreciate the work of the team. It's taken us a couple of years to really bring the vision to bear, but I do think that we're redefining, to Dr. Comfort's language, of we're doing everything in this district to match our strategy. and we're no longer constrained by the limitations on the strategies that we want to bring to bear. And as we learn from our strategies, we'll make those improvements. I do think decreasing enrollment averaging is a cancer that the state needs to address. It is the fastest way to get students what they need in the state of Colorado is to fully implement, what's the bill,
1425.
1425 from last year. Weights against students of need is the fastest way to get the dollars where they go. You can't get the dollars there right now because we continue to fund districts that don't have kids. Now, I understand that it's hard. We live with this all the time. We have a utilization rate in some of our buildings in the 50 and 60%. I understand that those changes are hard. But cumulatively speaking, we're at 10% of the overall state's budget shortfall over a decade of what we've been paid extra for kids that we don't have. And I'm not gonna go backwards on the slides again, but I know there are less children per household. But the number of kids that are no longer in District 11 are just going to non-District 11 schools. They still live in our boundaries. The population of the county has doubled in that same time period. So the state has to figure out a smoothing factor that is a measurement or ratio of permits in and permits out. If people are not choosing your school system, you as a Board of Education have to make changes that say, how will they choose our school system? Now, if you can show that the Goodyear factory closed and you have this massive outflow of families that no longer live within your boundaries, well, then I do think there's a place for enrollment averaging to not make that a horrible experience for the school district. But we have suffered from not providing a product that our community has been responsive to. And now we've turned that corner on enrollment, which says now we can provide balanced budgets based upon what the state offers. It's a really tremendous opportunity for us to project where we're going to go into the future without constantly being addicted to money that is from years before. And again, as another example of the work that Dr. Comforter's team has done, you never hear our district talking about what we lost from ESSER. Because 2.5 years ago, we projected what we would lose from ESSER and managed our way off of that. And everybody else is now still complaining about the money that's not available. There's never gonna be enough money in public education. What you do with the money is the difference.
Okay, Director, finally.
Yes, thank you. I did remember one other thing I wanted to follow up on, and that was the energy audit, and you briefly spoke to it. But we haven't spoken about it today, and we were going to get we were going to have that conversation, I believe, tonight. And so the energy audit, for those who don't recall, we invested some funds to find out where we could save money. And so as we're talking about investing and saving money, can you address
Yeah,
that?
I'd love to.
This was just to provide you some context. Director Art had requested this. The board gave it thumbs up. We discussed it during the board agenda setting meeting and
Yep.
Superintendent call.
Yeah, so we'd like to bring that to the board as part of our capital plan once we get the budget approved. So we're all focused right now for most of Brandon's team on this budget process. And my capital team, which is starting to filter in for the Jenkins update and the Palmer work that's already happened. We're gonna bring a capital plan of which the energy audit is in that capital plan because it's a capital expenditure. So that will come. Do we have a date for that yet?
I think
Ms.
it was
Olson?
mentioned around June.
June?
June 11th.
Yeah.
June 11th. So we're gonna bring that as a capital piece of the capital budget. We're waiting for the best grant information on our Jenkins budget, which will help us prioritize how we spend our budget dollars on the capital expenditures for this summer and the rolling 5-year plan that we have.
Dr. I have communicated with the company who did our audit, so they are prepared to come on that meeting day and
Okay.
we will have a presentation.
All right.
Yep.
And part of it is just my frustration, asked about it in October or December, I forget. And yes, we had a brief little set of slides on it, but I would be delighted to hear from them because that wasn't quite sufficient to give us how much we might save. And, you know, the sooner we do something like that, presumably the sooner the students and we are benefiting. So I'm glad to hear it's still on the schedule.
Yep, we're still talking multiple times a week.
Oh, okay.
So we will, I think we'll bring a really high quality update and I think it will give the board the information that it needs to decide if it wants to move forward or not.
Thank you.
So it was initially scheduled to come today during the agenda setting meeting. Superintendent Gall shared his vision about wanting to bring this in June, and that's why it got pushed back into June. One more thing before we move on from this conversation, there is a lot of misinformation out there, so I just wanted to clarify that, and you mentioned that too. We are not cutting teaching positions at schools. Okay, it didn't happen this year. There is some misconception out there that we cut teaching positions for this academic school year at schools. You mentioned that if we had to right size for our enrollment numbers based on the enrollment formula, staffing enrollment formula, we would lose about 100 teaching positions, and we didn't. We preserved teaching positions, and going forward, that will be based on the student-based budgeting.
That's correct. That number is actually up a little bit. Actually, we're adding this to the budget book this year because we've moved away from a typical ratio, and you're actually going to see class size ratios. Now, that's not perfect. Obviously, I'm going to get an email. There's going to be a teacher who has more than X number of kids in their room. But I think it will showcase maybe what used to be unintentional, but now is intentional, a reduced class size average across schools that I think will be really interesting information for the board to consider. Because it will speak to that line a little bit, where right now, as we're projecting next year, we have some really great class sizes. We haven't run the numbers across all schools, but in elementary schools, I think our highest average is 22-1. We have many that are at 20 or even a little under. Just thinking about classroom teachers, not all teachers in the building. So yes, we are not balancing the budget by cutting teachers. In fact, ratios will continue to be even better in general across the system next year.
Thank you. Again, appreciate all the work that has gone into this, and we look forward to this coming to the board dais as a non-action and action item going forward. Our community got to listen to this presentation. I know that this has also gone through the TAC budget subcommittee, and you've got feedback from that committee as well. Has this information about this preliminary compensation that you were talking about even shared with our employee groups and their
No, you are the first seeing it.
Okay, great. At some point in time, it'll get shared soon enough.
Absolutely, yeah.
With the CSEA and ESP.
We always want to make sure the board is not surprised with
Perfect.
information like that.
As we go through this
It's in my
process.
contract. Surprises.
And to our community, you listen to this conversation. So this is the factual information that was shared out there. So if there are misconceptions that are floating out there, reach out to the board members. We are happy to have this discussion with you as to how this budget got framed, and also listen to your feedback and input as we go through adopting this budget over the next month or so. With that, moving on to the next item on the agenda, it is the middle school proficiency, and this was an item that the board prioritized at the beginning of the school year during our board retreats and stuff. This was an area of concern that was brought about over the last several years, that the accountability system in the middle school, in the middle schools were generally lacking. And to provide some context to that, there are students that Superintendent Gall has referred to can get failing grades all through 6th grade or 7th grade, but they get elevated to the next grade and the next grade, and then they get to high school level with significant gaps in their education. So the board prioritized how can we bring some accountability to the middle school system, and this is the conversation that is now feedback that we are going to get from administration and some accountability. Superintendent.
I'll turn it over to Area Superintendent Darren Joyner in just a second, but I want to also introduce our esteemed group that helped bring this to bear. Chris Kilroy in our enrollment office, also a former middle school principal, Ray Cockrell, our principal at Swigert Middle School, Stephanie Leisure, our principal at North Middle School, and of course, Mr. Joyner, our former middle school principal at Jenkins and now Northeast Area Superintendent leader. What I really appreciate here is the team has come back to me. We've delayed this a couple of times. As it has come to me, I kept coming back and I was like, and, or yes, or why? How do we get to the real heart of the question that we're trying to ask here? So I think what you'll see here as Darren goes through this is there are some really quick, easy fixes that are gonna pick up some of these kids in the middle space that just need what I call like a little incremental change. But we're gonna ask some questions to the board of how hard does the board wanna go? Because there are some transformational ideas out there. You'll see a slide in here that'll show, Dr. Carey will certainly pick up on the lack of correlation between the grades that we give and a child's ability to demonstrate that as a learning standard on either a formative or a summative assessment. Never do I believe that a child's learning is displayed only through an assessment that the state gives us or even the ones that we give. But when you see the gap in those correlations, it should make the hair stand up on the back of your neck that says we're not doing something right. Because we are giving kids A's and B's who are losing learning every year. And we can say there's something wrong with the state assessment, but when you see the challenges that we have in lack of proficiency for our middle school children as they progress into high school, you're gonna start to grapple with, I think we have to be not just incremental in identifying kids earlier and coming up with better interventions and MTSS, but thinking more broadly about what type of policy levers do we want to implement? What's the connection between lack of proficiency and extended learning? Saturdays academies, after school, summer bridge. Right now, we leave all that to open to chance because parents will say, my kid's an AB student. What's the problem?
Right.
And then we'll show, and again, because this is the way education works, we'll show this very convoluted message from either our own STAR assessment or from CMAS that says your kid is, some percentage of this, of that, and it doesn't make any sense. Parents like report cards, and parents are seeing my kid's a B student, what's the problem? Why do they have to go to summer school? And we're going, they're reading at a 4th grade level in 8th grade. That's why they need to go to summer school. Area Superintendent Joyner?
All right, thank you. Good to be with you this evening. Definitely a topic that we are passionate about, so we're excited to have the conversation with you. I think before we even get into the slides, one thing that we are so excited about with this is the idea that we can get supports to our students quicker and more frequently by reviewing data that actually matters and speaks to the success predictability of a student. You heard Superintendent Gall talk about grade correlation. We'll get into that in a little bit. But we really want to focus on how do we get teeth into a system? How do we get tighter as a middle school group with the staff supports that we already have in place? We don't need extra staff to do what we're asking to do tonight. We need accountability, we need a vision, and we need to have regular check-ins and action behind this plan. So you'll see the real why behind the middle school accountability plan is to activate developmentally appropriate supports quickly for our kids. So we don't need to wait until the end of a quarter, the end of a semester, certainly not the end of a school year when students are showing warning signs that, hey, I'm not responding to what you're giving me here at the traditional school, right? We also believe that middle school performance is a precursor to high school engagement, and we will execute the system now to address high school dropout rates, okay? There's a further conversation then at the elementary school, right? The real conversation is how do we intervene sooner to help get our students on the path to success?
So it's important to make sure we're thinking about the current state as well, because it's informed how we have developed this proposed system. As middle school principals work together, we really engaged in a lot of discussion. How is this working at your school? How is this working in your system? What's the student experience? And we engaged in a lot of data review as well. This uncovered some opportunities for consistency. We see that there are spaces where things are going well, working strong. There are individual cases where it's working well. But what we want is to propose a system to bring about consistency, especially in these areas. Quarterly grade reports, MTSS process, meaning that multi-tiered system of supports that we're using, how, when, and to what extent we are intervening when a student needs additional support or accountability, and a consistent process to regularly identify those student supports as well. So with that current state in mind, I want to talk about a few potential student scenarios in the proposed system. So this is how we might respond to students who are identified as not succeeding with the system that we are going to dig into here. So this slide really illustrates the system's ability to pivot quickly, as Mr. Joyner shared, to get those supports to the students. So student A on this side of the slide doesn't respond quickly to the interventions here. You can see there are Fs in math and English in the first quarter, and the second quarter, and the third and fourth quarter. And so those interventions tighten. That system responds to the student's continued need. From things like initially working on setting some SMART goals with counselors, meeting with the counselor weekly for some feedback and support, to then revisiting those goals, meeting daily for support, and parents getting updated regularly, to even those higher levels of intensity that might include daily check-in, check-out, and looking at some of those more intensive supports that Superintendent Gall alluded to, things like potential mandatory extended learning or summer school for the student. Student B, however, has those Fs in math and English in first quarter, and those same interventions take place, but the student starts to respond. By second quarter, you see the performance improving. Now we've raised our grade in English to a C. We still are going to revisit our SMART goals. We still have an F in math. We're still going to make sure we're getting those counselor supports and parents are getting that information, but that student then is responding by third and fourth quarter and achieving in both classes at the passing level. And so those supports step back a little bit, they relax a little. And I just think that the importance of this is that it allows, the system allows for responsiveness to what the students need, differentiation to quickly meet students' needs.
Yeah, so just kind of reiterate what Darren said, about raising the bar. So one of the things I want to say before I share a little bit of this information is that if CMAS is the gold standard for how our school is doing, it's how we're measured by the state, there's no option there. It's the game that we play, it's the game that we're in. And the CMAS assessment's pretty solid in terms of what it measures and being an indicator of how the schools are doing. When CMAS happens, it shouldn't be a surprise in June when the scores come back. We should know by November or December kind of where we're going to end up. So the question is, how do we have so many kids with sort of discrepant scores, right? They have A's and B's here, and then we see on their CMAS score that they're not performing at the same level that's commensurate with their grades. So the idea is for a really structured intervention system at the middle school level. And it kind of mirrors what Darren was saying about MTSS. But what it has to get down to, because our metrics that we have in the school we've got enough information to make an assessment on a kid, an informed assessment to intervene. So really what we're looking at is a system where there is a team, it would be very similar to MTSS, where they are evaluating the student body on a regular scheduled timetable. And they would be looking at kids using 3 metrics to determine whether that child needs further intervention. So we can always go with the traditional grades. So obviously an F, and we're going to talk about grades here in a little bit, but Fs tend to be more accurate than As, right? Which sounds strange to say, but Fs are more accurate than As. The 3 criteria that we've sort of listed, we're saying that if you meet 2 out of 3 of these criteria, you would be the candidate to be rolled into an intervention system to address those deficits. So the 3 categories are going to be, if you have an F, would be 1 category. If your growth on STAR is below 35%, which seems low, but really 35 to 65 is the top of the bell curve. So that's where our cutoff is. Or if your proficiency is on the STAR test below proficient. So that means you're scoring a 1, 2, or 3, depending on how you're looking at the numbers.
Below approaching. Below approaching.
Below approaching, yeah, if you want to use that term, right. And so the idea is to have this team kind of evaluating the student body. We would have assessment across the street, make sure that everybody understands how to read the data, right? I think sometimes you get a lot of nod and smiles when people talk about data, but making sure that they're really literate and versed in that process. And when that team meets to evaluate the kids, they're looking at these 3 categories. And once that sort of 2 out of 3 categories have been met by a student, they would be rolled in to intervention. Now that intervention can be any number of things. Now, with the changing in the district, schedules and buildings have more flex. So there's a lot of opportunity for schools to build intervention into their schedule. Now you always have before school, you have after school, and some of the traditional things. But we have an opportunity right now to really not only implement a program like this, but to flex how the bandwidth in a school is used to address those deficits. And the idea would be that these kids would be rolled into that intervention until they could meet a benchmark that indicated they were at grade level in the 2 out of 3 categories in which they were deficient. The last part really is rolling the parent in. We would want the family involved with this process, involved with the conversation, so they're aware of what the school is doing, they can be supportive, and there's communication between the two. But what we're really looking at to get that bar as high as we can get it is to make sure we have a system that is consistent, meets regularly, looks at the same metrics, and screens kids in and out of this process in a really efficient way. Because right now, like Darren was saying, the trajectory of these kids that are missed in middle school, I think we all know what the outcome is in high school. It's pretty straightforward. So we want to catch that at that time, and then obviously the high school conversation would be a separate one. But this system, the way it's designed, is really a strong, organized, consistent process to field these kids into the intervention that they need. Yeah.
Can I very quickly just make sure I remember how this acronym works? So SGP is student growth percentile?
Yes.
And 50 means you're basically on track with your expected grade level progression. So when you say 35, this is a student who is actively losing ground.
So
Grade level expectations are rising at a certain rate, they are below that rate.
Right.
Okay, just check.
Just following up on that, if a child is entering sixth grade, let's say seventh grade proficiency already, do you expect that child to grow at 50 percentile SGP?
So
Because that student is above grade level.
above grade level.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason, so that's actually an academic myth, right? So if your child is scoring really high on STAR, in terms of what they're achieving, and their growth is 70%, that student's only being, so if that student is getting 1,200 on the STAR, just for the sake of conversation, that growth percentile, that student's only measured against the other 1,200s. So that student should be able to grow as much or as little. So what you find out is that if the kid is in the 20th percentile, that means schools in Colorado who are taking the STAR test, 80% of them are doing a better job educating their kids at that same level.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. So one thing that I want you to make sure that you understand is that these things are sort of taking place across schools in some ways, right? We are not doing this. So we are catching kids and we are intervening for kids, but what it is not is really systematized, right? If you take a look at the slide itself, like there's a variety of aspects within this that absolutely schools are doing, but in a variety of ways. Some, if not all, of our schools have an advisory like Chris talked about, a period that's within a school day that's scheduled, that's for intervention, that's for executive functioning, it could be for, as we've had in the last year, sort of this experiment where we're working on student agency and student engagement, where students are participating in school-based clubs and activities during the school day, or they are spending time with a trusted mentor adult. So the time is, I think, built in across all schools. Maybe there's one or two that it's not, but that aspect or that ability to do it is actually there. So it's just that we have not like made sure that it's strategically done across the board in the same way, or that it's necessarily with specific guidelines, which guidelines were maybe just what were aforementioned, right? All schools are engaged in MTSS. That definitely happens. However, it's done a little bit differently at every school, and sometimes, I mean, we've had teachers across the board who and us who talk about the difficulty that occasionally it veers into, instead of academic performance, it veers into behavior performance or frustrations with students, and it doesn't stay focused on what are the things that we actually need to make sure that we're catching students for, which is ultimately their academic performance. If you remember, our middle school cornerstone work over the past about a year and a half has focused on kind of four main things, and it was focused through agency and engagement. And one of those things was targeted student-adult relationships, like being strategic and partnering students and adults. Cross-curricular teaching and learning, again, building agency and engagement. interest-based clubs and activities during the school day, like what Superintendent Gall referred to. Establishing that one thing, if a student doesn't have it, that they come to school for. And then the middle school alignment to the D11 graduate profile, and in my case, the IB learner profile. So all these things, we are engaging students and we are working through those systems. This would make it more systematized. If you take a look also at how we might also improve that, is that we're looking to make sure that we reward students in a positive light if they do meet standards. So schools do that in a variety of ways as well. And although we might not end up the same in this way because we do have some license in how we value students, I think what we want to say is that we also wouldn't just look to make it punitive for how students are scheduled into their interventions, but we would also want to reward students who are doing the right things. There's a variety of positive incentives listed there, right? Whether it's awards and recognitions, positive phone calls, I mean, we hope that that is happening in the first place, school-wide eligibility to attend events. We've got a variety of schools who have really innovative ideas. So we're excited to learn more about those as well. And as we've approached this with our middle school counterparts, Ray and I, it was a really good conversation. It's not going to be easy because it will be some forced action and forced accountability on our parts. But for like Ray and I, we were talking about it, and I have the structure in place. I have the capability to do it. It's just taking the step to do it in a more systematic fashion and doing it more often to catch students who are responding, not responding, doing great, not doing great, and trying to figure out what it is that they need in order to respond well or get them out of the system by the end of the year.
And the beauty of the system is in partnership with the Education Insights Department, area superintendents regularly checking in, not on a quarterly basis, but on a mid-quarter basis to intervene quicker. We can help build those systems out for our school leaders. Outcomes, what we expect will happen is dramatically reducing the number of students showing a lack of growth, proficiency, and or performance. We do expect to see improvement in the student connection and the entire experience for a student in middle school. We do expect to instill positive work habits and organizational skills needed for students to excel at the next level. And that quarterly system-wide accountability update to you, the board. That is something that we want to commit to you because we should see a decrease. We will see a decrease in the number of students who enter the system, and by the end of the year, those who are still needing the same level of support. This slide is speaking to that strong correlation because we're using the metrics of STAR for growth for SGP and then obviously for proficiency level. We want to speak to the fact that there is a strong correlation. Those are the words of Dr. Colicky in Education Insights between performance on STAR and what we see our students outputting on CMAS. What we can't say the same for though, and this is what Superintendent Gall had mentioned up front, as we were digging in to the metrics that we want to use for the accountability system, what we noticed in partnership with Education Insights, we asked Dr. Colicky, can you please find the data that correlates our grades for math and ELA versus performance on STAR? And what you'll see here is that a perfect correlation would be that top left graph which would be 1.0, and we do not have that. In fact, what you actually see is a huge discrepancy between the way that we report our grades and student performance in STAR. So without going, we'll keep it high level for the purposes of this slide, but the main point is that we have more work to do at the middle school level when it comes to what are we putting into our grade books, right? And so while we're talking about an entire accountability system this evening, I can assure you that we'll be digging in deeper into what constitutes a grade getting into a grade book. Do we weight things? Let's take math, for instance. Do we have appropriate weighting measures in our grade book for homework versus quizzes and assessments, right, and tests? So those conversations are to come as a result of the work that we just begun. And then finally, we have reversing the trend. I love this slide because it really just speaks to the actual system itself. That when a student is screaming and waving the flag to us that, hey, I'm not responding to the tier 1 supports, tier 1 instruction that's being delivered at my middle school, what are you going to do for me? And I just call it the fail-proof system. We have a duty and responsibility to intervene on behalf of our students. We need to love these kids and give them supports as if they are our own kids because they are our own kids. And so this is the plan. And we broke it down into initial, extensive, and critical support. So at that mid-quarter, part of first quarter, a student who is hitting 2 out of the 3 criteria that Mr. Kilroy spoke to, that's where we activate our initial supports. And we have our parent meeting, our intervention placement. They might even find themselves into an academic support class, what we know as an advisory class period. But we will select those teachers and train them on the tight systems and instruction that we expect to see out of that class as well. It's not a study hall. It's not a study hall. It is a class that is targeting these specific organizational skills and accountability that our students are lacking that got them into the situation that they're in. When you move down into the extensive support, that would be where the student has gotten multiple mid-quarter checks and are still not responding. So if you go back to, I won't go all the way back to that slide, but the one that Ray was talking about with student A, who wasn't responding to the supports, now we need to activate more frequent check-ins and more accountability. And that's what you see there on top of the initial support. It doesn't replace, it's in addition to. Because now we have a student who is saying, help me. Now we got both hands up. You have to help me, I'm not responding. Eventually, if we get to the end of a school year and a student still has not turned the tide and are on that path towards success, that's where we start looking at those critical supports. Extended learning days, tutoring before and after school that's mandated, mandatory summer school, and maybe even the idea of a middle school academy, to repeat standards and coursework that was not mastered during the regular school year. Okay, and so that's where we need your guidance and your help as a board, is where do we go? How do we put teeth behind what we want to activate here as a system to do right for our kids and make sure that we're not passing kids on to the next grade level when they've already shown us that they're not ready for it, right? We have a duty to intervene sooner, and so that's where we open the conversation.
Are we done? Do you have any more slides?
Nothing, and you don't want me to sing, so I'm done at this point.
We don't want you to say
No.
that's for sure.
So again, we think the middle schools coming together are gonna just take these incremental opportunities. We have the data now to identify kids. We have what we believe are the right actions. But I'll tell you that the preponderance, I would nearly say 90% of the expulsions that I see are kids that are straight Fs in middle school. Now, they're not expelling until high school, and they're still straight Fs in high school. So I think we have a easy win, which is we're gonna get tighter in how we work together to make sure that kids aren't just passing their way around until they find a middle school that doesn't believe in early intervention and supports. But I do think there is still this larger question on what does the board think about policy and where is policy in regard to if the number one way to student achievement is access to high quality instruction, the 2 main levers are the quality and the time that we can get access to. So how do we create, maybe through the parent pledge and re-bringing that up again, of if you bring your kid to school X number of days and they struggle, please give them these many more days or hours. We can then go operationalize that. A lot of these are by location, or we can figure out ways to do it. So our middle schools all have a very late start, so some of them do some really intensive academic supports in the morning. But right now, we don't have a policy lever that forces these actions. We still get feedback. Last year's summer bridge was an invite only based upon where your student was and their state progression of their performance. And we had a gross undershowing because parents said, my kid's just fine, they got a 3.5. And so we have a disconnect between how we grade, and so I think the other end of that conversation to ask the board, or do you want to find a way that your state score is somehow incorporated in your grade? In some states, you have a board of regents, you can't graduate if you don't pass the state test. Now, again, I know that a test alone does not, a test doesn't singularly define a student success, but right now, the tests are just completely separate from the definition of student success. And I think that those lines have to start coming closer together. So maybe there's a trap door that says you can't be an A-B student if you're red on the state test to force some connection to these two different things. Our highest performing students from a grade point average are also our highest performing opt-out of state tests, which means that we don't get the benefit from our highest performing students. And again, don't hate the player, hate the game. This is just the way we're graded by the state. The way we're graded by the state are those tests. But that slide to me is the one that the board should be thinking. We either got to be tighter in telling policy on parents what the expectation is, or we have to change the way grades are reflected, that somehow or another, the thing that the school system is evaluated on is also what your kids are evaluated on. But I'll pause there for board discussion and thank the team for the hard work they've done this year to come together. And they're all here, they're just not all here. All the middle school leaders and their teams have been a part of this, as has David Colickey's team. And I appreciate Kilroy coming back as a guest principal from his time before. He loved it.
Thank you. I saw Director Jenkins first, so questions and comments from the board. Director Jenkins.
I have a couple thoughts. I would like to see us attach scores to grades. But the problem is CMAS is usually embargoed until like end of August, so by that time that 6th grader is a 7th grader. So can we use STAR? Since there's such a strong correlation, can we use STAR testing into the grade book? And are we already doing that? Our teachers, is that like a weighted part of the principals? Is that a weighted part of, hey, teachers, 20% of the grades need to be STAR testing scores?
No.
Okay.
Talk about anybody that uses Eureka that way and some of the formative assessments that they build. Does anybody use into module?
We don't have it, there is, right now, our grade books are not set up in a systematic manner, right? If you wanted to do that 10% was homework and 15 or 20% was class work and 20% was quizzes, 30% was tests. We don't have that systematic approach. It's not a bad idea, but we don't have that systematic approach at this point because that would weight 50% of proficiency on like how you perform. So we don't have that yet. We do have absolutely though, it's just not, it's probably not that it's the weighted like it should be. Because yes, of course, we have tests and quizzes that are within grades and occur within grade books. But I don't think I have any teachers who use STAR as a actual grade metric. Not that it wouldn't work, but I don't think they do at this point.
And does anybody use Eureka and a module as actual quizzes that then get incorporated in? Because we saw the correlation even between Eureka and Math Star to be pretty high. I don't have a graph for it. But schools that were using those products saw a very strong correlation.
Yes, at Swagger, we are using the Eureka Math quizzes, exit tickets, end of module assessments, and those do show up in the grade book. I would hesitate to say that that's taking place in an entirely consistent and systematic manner yet. But that is something that's taking place in our math team specifically. Eureka is definitely an entry point for that work.
We do as well, but I would also say though where I don't know for sure is if, say for instance, all students scored in the 70s, that grades don't get curved. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that there's not the exact proficiency weighted across grade-wise, which is where that stuff happens, where the disparity happens.
And that's more the operational side. I think my thoughts are, if the job of the school board is to ensure that our students are meeting academic standards, how are we ensuring that that's true? So, I remember teaching in one year, a principal I had didn't want there to be any Fs. And so adjust your weights and all that so there's no Fs because we want, and I completely disagreed with it ethically, but that was what we did that year and we pushed back where we could. But I would like to see something the other concern I had in the middle school space teaching 6th and 7th grade was you knew those groups of kids at the 6th grade level, right? The high flyers, the academically low, and you did the MTSS, or back in the day it was RTI, right? You did the whole process, and you got to the end of the year and you got just enough progress reporting data to finally get somewhere, and it was like, oh, it's 4th quarter, we'll take care of them next year. And they started the whole dang process over again and wasted a whole other academic year.
Yep.
So if that's still occurring, I think that needs to be the number one need that we meet, is that vertical alignment from 6th through 8th, because they just restart the whole thing over again as we gotta go through the process now this year. Things could have happened over the summer, and it's like, that's bullcrap. Nothing happened over summer, but more summer slide. And so it has to be vertically aligned through the middle schools. But I would like to see something, you mentioned something profound. I didn't see anything quite profound in here other than maybe this middle school academy. I know we've got Tesla as a middle school, that's an alternative piece. If we have students that are significantly behind, as a science teacher, I was highly certified in science, but I don't know how to teach reading. So we need to have some sort of, by December of 7th grade, if you're not on it, you're going to the alternative middle school where we do have reading teachers and math teachers that are trained to help get that 7th grader reading at a 3rd grade level up to snuff before they get to 8th grade, and then they can earn their way back into the traditional classroom. And maybe that's the fire that these kids need to go, I don't want to be away from my friends. So I'm looking for that kind of stuff where it's like, we know if they start getting Fs, they're going to continue to get Fs and Fs and Fs and Fs. And we know that based on their 3rd grade reading scores, we know how many jail beds to build for the future. So we've got to start tackling it, not only at the K-5 level, which we've already discussed, but this middle school level needs to be very robust. And it's going to be a big push. And we're not trying to take away academic freedom of how you build your grade book and your weightings, but if we're held accountable to teaching standards, we have to have something in place that guarantees we're doing that for parents, kids. That's what I'd like to see. Take that how you want, the 30,000 foot level, and bring us a plan, but I'd like to see some pushes.
Good, yeah, at this time. Director Backus.
So the profound piece for me was the graph that showed a correlation between grades and proficiency on the testing.
This one.
Yes, thank you. So as a classroom teacher, I would have benefited in my PLCs to have that information that says, and have it a learned conversation. Have it a learned conversation with my peers on how it is that either my kids were hopefully above the line, but maybe my grading was not in line, and so maybe my kids were falling below the line. I think for my teacher development, it would have been startling to have that opportunity rather than in the practice that we've had in the past, waiting until the next year or the very end of the year to see how your kids have done. So that to me, I think really is something that is profound and would make an opportunity for teachers to grow in their profession in a way that's not evaluative, and at the same time deepens our understanding about what it is to not only teach, but to measure the effectiveness of our teaching. Along with that, and again, going back to my time as an interventionist, if they're not in school, we can't teach them. And so I know that we have heard in past board meetings that when we hear about chronic absences that plans have been in place, and I want to reinforce that whole strategy. If they're not in school, we can't teach them. Our situation at the middle school was children in 6th grade continued to miss their last period class because parents would pick up from elementary and come over and pick up at middle school rather than wait 45 minutes or an hour to pick up their middle school child. Noting those trends would help tremendously in keeping our kids at school. The last one I wanted to mention was AVID. And so in these strategies, would AVID flow into what you've already put in place? Because AVID, to my understanding, is goal setting and is checking in. The effectiveness of it, I don't know. But I have talked to parents whose children have participated who are very happy with what their child has benefited from. So would this be would Avid be a part of this strategy, or would Avid stand outside of this strategy?
There's aspects and best practices from different schools, different programs that we want to pull together to make our own. So yes, I would say there absolutely could be some Avid strategies that we would pull in because they're proven practices, but there also will be other strategies that we would want to bring to the table as well, to what Director Jurgensen said about building a robust system.
So are you saying that Avid would be replaced by these strategies?
No, that's not what I said. I
Okay.
said
Avid's a tool of which we would explore if that's the right tool at the right time for the right school. What we want to get is continuity through the schools that we're using very similar tools. What we do find, I don't have a graphic on it, but I would likely bet that there's a strong correlation between Ds and Fs and school mobility. Families will have a discussion with a principal that is seeking to hold a hard academic attendance or behavior line, and then families will opt out of that school. We need to be tighter as a system that says, if you move from Swigert to North, you're gonna get the same early identification that says, I see that Sally or Steve is struggling with their reading. I'd like you to now meet Ms. Hafley instead of Dr. Malpacum. But a very similar type of experience. Right now, there's too much left to chance, and the numbers are overwhelming. Mitchell High School, the average ninth grader comes in at between a fifth and a sixth grade reading level. Right? That cannot singularly be on Mitchell High School to solve. We have to invest and say, what do we have to do differently there to do it? I do think that we're getting good notes so far around the conversation, so we're enjoying this. But so Avid as a tool, but without saying every school has to do Avid. Because Avid, as it is attractive for some people, is polarizing. I would say my overall take in education is people really love their tools, and they will die for a specific tool. So yes to what Avid represents as an intervention to get that extra time and that skill building, because it's not just about the learning standard, it's the inability to learn that resulted in a failed learning standard. So we can get it all the way back to why are you not engaged in learning, not why do you not understand square roots? Because they're usually correlated.
That's not.
Dr. Gary.
I think Jill's been,
Okay,
yeah.
I disagree. Okay, go ahead.
No, you didn't, I was watching.
I did. But then I waited to see if either one of you had asked my question, and you kind of did a little bit. So now I'm just gonna tag on to it. As a former high school teacher who had middle school kids come over, who were very proud of the fact that they failed everything and got moved along to high school, and couldn't, as you mentioned, Mitchell, kids would come in with fourth or fifth grade readings levels, and I would get them as sophomores, juniors, seniors, and I've got credit deficient seniors who really should have been held back, but we don't hold back, and there's no dangling carrot, you know what I mean? For kids to actually do what it is that they're supposed to do when they're in middle school, so that when they get to high school, that they do get to high school. So my question is, what happens to that eighth grader who has failed the majority of his middle school classes at this point? I've been out of the classroom for just under 2 years, and when I left, they were still passed along into high school.
They're still passed along.
That's very frustrating coming from somebody who's, teaching honors classes and having kids thinking they could take an honors class because then everybody gets to take the honors class because we wouldn't want to hurt their feelings. And they're taking an honors class and then they don't do well in the honors class because they've never been held accountable to things prior in their educational years. And so I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I am concerned that having experienced it, that kids are passed along for the sake of I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear a parent holler at me, and then the disservice is done to the kid. I've asked other teachers in the high school that I taught at, what happens after graduation I get that they're not necessarily our responsibility after graduation. We have them up until graduation, and the response I got was, it's not our job. I mean, and that was the tone that I got it in, and I thought, it is our job. So how do we make, Darren, this is all great. How do we make middle school have more teeth in it so that when they do get to high school, them being held accountable isn't such a shock to their system?
And that's my ask to the board, is do you want to create policy that requires some version of passing, of which we can give you 3 different options of how to define that, and 3 different options of how to correct it early with interventions, but do we wanna create a hard line that says, if you're a straight F student, you're not going forward?
I would be in favor of that.
Again, I'm asking the board.
Sure.
if that's what
I'm
the
just
board
putting it
wants.
out
As
there.
one board member, she's in favor.
As one board member, I'm in favor.
And it's a wide open debate in America. Repeating a grade without understanding why you're not engaged in learning is likely only to repeat that same failure. We believe that we have strategies that we think middle school academies, rethinking Jumpstart and or Summer Bridge, rethinking extensions of time during the day and on the weekends can both mitigate that risk earlier, and then when we get to that space, not be stuck with half of the 8th grade in a particular school doesn't move forward.
I do want to be clear that I'm not slamming teachers at all on this. I have seen them teach. I have been so incredibly impressed by the middle school teachers. There's a disconnect from what the teacher is teaching and the level of involvement that a kid has in his own education.
Yeah, what you're talking about is the social promotion that happens.
Yeah, I know, and I mean, in my day, the threat of you not moving forward with your friends was well enough to keep you in line.
And that is the same environment I grew up in
Right.
back in India. And it goes back to what Superintendent Gall was talking about at the time. At the end of the school year, whatever grades I was on, I was tested on the content material. And at the end of the summer or middle of summer, we would get report cards telling whether we are advancing to the next grade or not. But those expectations were set right at the very beginning of the year.
Right.
That students knew that if they don't participate, engage, and show adequate growth in the end of the year school testing, they are not going to advance. Guess what? 98% of the students advanced. Okay, because the expectations were set right at the very beginning,
Right.
and they didn't want to fail. Right now, there are no expectations. So
Right.
then we don't have any expectations at the middle school level. I'll come to you, but Director Carey, you had you had that.
Yeah, I would give you 3 things to be thinking about. The first is what I'll just kind of broadly sum up as skin in the game. You want students, parents, families to have accurate information about where their kid is academically. So this was something that that Mike brought up, that it's just a bad situation where you have students who are getting A's and B's, and then by other metrics, they're lagging behind substantially in terms of grade level content. You can't really expect parents to be able to make good decisions for their kids when the school is telling them one thing and we have other internal data that says something very different. So my first point would be, like, you want students and parents to have accurate information. And I'm not gonna pretend to be knowledgeable about what that means at an elementary level. I know very well what that means at the college level. Those are not the same thing, and I know those are not the same thing. And the second thing I would talk about is maybe just to kind of put another framing on some of the things that have been said already. When we talk about having teeth in our policies, when we talk about keeping students in line, what we're really talking about is making sure that students are exposed to content that they're ready for. If you put students in a classroom where they are not academically in a position to succeed, number one, they're not going to succeed, right? This is something, we've seen a number of improvement plans at this point, and this is something that is consistently held up as a problem. When you have students coming into your system that are multiple grade levels behind, as in the case of Mitchell, there's just nothing you can do as a teacher. Because you're trying to give student instruction the best you possibly can while having students who just in no way, shape, or form are really capable of benefiting from it. And now you're trying to figure out how to bring them up to speed to get the content that you did last class, and it's just hopeless. It's just so impossibly difficult. So when you put students into a situation where they're exposed to content they're not ready for, it's not fair to the teachers to expect them to pull a rabbit out of the hat. It's not fair to building leaders. And most importantly, it's not fair to the students. We know that one of the big drivers of poor student behavior is when they're in a class that they know full well they're not going to succeed in. Students having motivation to participate fully in their class comes from a combination of two basic things. One of which is, they perceive the value in what it is that they're learning. I know with peak experiences and we've heard a few times tonight, we gotta find those things that the kids are interested in and give them a reason to be here. So I know we're thinking about that side of it. So one piece of motivation is the students need to see value, but the other piece is they need to have a reasonable expectation of success. If you put any of us as adults into a situation where we have no confidence that we are even capable of succeeding, we're just not gonna waste effort, because we're rational, logical people. If we say, I could put in a bunch of effort and I would fail, or I could chill out and I would fail, what are you gonna do? You're gonna chill out. Why not? Your effort won't make a difference anyway. So we just can't be putting students into a position where they're set up for failure. So I am in agreement with Director Hafley that whether that takes the form of holding kids back, or whether that takes the form of you need to no kidding show on these assessments that we understand that you're ready, we gotta be making sure that our students are put into positions where they are going to succeed. And that means not advancing them by default through the system, because then we get situations like we've talked about where someone's 3 grade levels behind and there's just not a lot of hope at that point. And then the final thing I would leave you with is, in order to do this, what I want you all to be thinking of from a system standpoint is rapid feedback loops. Because the problem with CMAS, as has already been mentioned, is you get those grades, they take the test, and then we get them in like August, and at that point it's too late to update on much of anything. The way you really make progress, whether that's in education or whether that's in the tech world or whatever, is you have rapid feedback loops of incremental progress. You say, here's where we're at, here's what we're gonna try, here's how we're gonna assess it, and then we'll see, did that work, did that not work, do we stay the course, do we pivot? So again, I don't know what that looks like in middle school, I know what that looks like in college, but that's what you gotta be thinking about. How can we empower our teachers to basically say, here's a way we're gonna assess student progress, and then here's how we're gonna iterate on that, and do that rapidly and frequently throughout a quarter.
You have a comment?
I'm just nodding my head in agreement. The cycles are there. We don't want to increase the amount of testing.
Yes, yeah.
But we already have testing that exists that isn't called testing. I already brought up Eureka Squared. We'll be bringing CKLA forward again. These modern curriculums have ways for us to be getting end of module feedback cycles. What we have to do is we have to operationalize that it's not an option for you to use the built-in digitized interim assessments in Eureka as a part of your grading practice. Because then if we make it mandatory, it gives us the ability to then know where kids are and where they are not. Now, the other side to this, Director Carey, is there are no surprises on mid-year or end-of-year data. There are none. I can tell you what I'm gonna see by each school, because we're still that far away from guaranteeing access to consistent, high-quality instruction across the district. We are operationalizing that. We are in a 3rd year. We feel very strongly about the strategies we brought to bear. They get better every year. But we're still not quite in that place where shortening the cycle is actually going to change the outcome. We know, and I'm particularly looking at Principal Cockrell there, who's taken over one of our most challenged middle schools. She could walk in any day of the week and tell you, I know exactly where we are not meeting expectations, and yet I am at my wit's end to get us there. And so, yes, we think that we are prepared for the board, if you guys give thumbs, to start moving policy into a tighter space. And we need to think about the catch and release that doesn't just result in massive amounts of kids being held back, because we won't solve the problem that way either. We have to, I mean, it is not as simple as a child with an F is just a child who's not trying hard. If America was as simple as just try harder, well, we would have solved that a long time ago. We do have incredible supports in our schools and a central office to address that. But I do think we would benefit in the same way of a no cell phone policy that everybody told us we cannot operationalize. We've now operationalized and the state wants to make it law. So I do think we can be a district that finds that balance, that says, yes, we have an expectation. And please let us identify why it is you're not learning so we can help correct that. But no, we can't just push that kid out because either push them out or up, because then we're only delaying our own future inheritance of that problem as a city.
Two quick points, and then I'll give the mic back to someone else. I'm in total agreement that any solution that drastically increases kind of testing time or administrative overhead is going to backfire. I'm in full agreement on that. Creating a bunch of extra work for teachers and a bunch of extra random testing is not the way to do this. But the thing I would maybe just push back on is you said there are no surprises at mid-year data, but I think what that grade correlation chart is telling you is there are surprises to the parents and to the students. My question would be, you know, we may have plenty of internal data that predicts CMS with reasonable accuracy, and we can talk in a very casual way about students walking to Mitchell, 3 grade levels behind. Do parents and students understand that with the grades that they're getting? Because I know that tragically this does not always happen, but in general, a parent is going to want their student to succeed academically. And if we're not giving them the information that lets them know that there are problems to be solved, then they can't help us in our mission.
And that's the lack of correlation between grades and the standard. Generally, the population believes that you overtest and this test doesn't represent the student. Stephanie, can you summarize the meeting you brought me to before CMAS? What you did with the students?
Yeah, so most of the time, right, students don't understand why we test in the first place, and they don't understand what relevance it has for them or what any of the numbers mean or why we're aiming to get to any specific goal or whatever it is. So for me, and this is me having come from D2 and that we did this like consistently yearly there, is that we made sure that kids knew where we were as a school, where we had been, where we were currently, and where we needed to go compared to everybody else. So they know that I'm competitive, and so I bring the kids, every single kid in and right before testing, and we talk about why we test and what the reasons are behind it, and yes, that it's not easy and that it builds, but that it's necessary that we do it, and this is what it means. We talk about MGP and SGP and what that means, and no, it's a fallacy if you're a kid who really performs well and that means that you can't grow. Don't listen to that, like you can. So we just talk about what it all means, and then what our scores are related to every school in District 11 and some outside, because we're getting to that point. Like North is at a spot where we should be competing with other districts, and that's why, so we do that. So
And the takeaway was great education for the children. I love the competitive spirit at North because the kids were super excited how close they were to, because they were the second highest performing middle school. But what was still missed, to your point, Director Carey, is your ELA scores were at a 51, which is beating, if you remember our budget slide, our 42 overall. So good for you, you're beating us. But I sat at a table with 6 young gentlemen and I said, what does that 51 mean? And they said, it means we're better than 4 other middle schools and we're almost to that one. And I said, it means by the state, only half of you at this table are at grade level. And you could see their eyes go like that big, because that's not the experience. And we're not trying to harp on kids because they're children, but we need to be able to express that we believe that there's value in us wanting children to meet and exceed the state expectation. We believe that this idea of a set of learning standards that matches a graduation profile, that matches credit requirements, that are all state governed, prepares you for life. And we can manage the anomalies. I know there will be kids who are wildly gifted, of which no state test is ever going to represent. Line those single-digit percentage kids up, and we'll figure out graduation defense by portfolio, we'll figure out all kinds of things. But right now, the giant disconnect is, congratulations, here's your A, here's your B, and we're a system that nowhere near 50% of the kids are at grade level. So like that is a policy question of, we're not saying your kid is only a test. But again, I never met a 1400 on the SAT who didn't do just fine.
When we talk about consequences, so we're talking about pieces that we could put into place to bring home to students and their parents the significance of doing well in middle school. I think work still has to be done on research that says it is not detrimental to their development as they go through, because I've tried to pull kids back. Not only have parents been resistant, but teachers in the building have been resistant. So we need to have that research, we need to have that rational piece that says, and then once we get that piece, if it's true that it doesn't have a detrimental effect on their social emotional growth as they continue on through school, because we don't want 20-year-olds in high school. What we do want to do is to be able to say, not only is this an opportunity and a gift of time for you to catch the skills, learn the skills, demonstrate the skills that we have expectations for 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, but we also have to make sure we're implementing the strategies for teachers who give those students that support that's meaningful to them to make it a difference. Just repeating the grade and teaching it the same way you taught it first place doesn't make it happen better for the second go around.
Right.
And this is for somebody who took algebra twice in high school. I wasn't ready the first time, but he was so good. I took it the second time, he taught it the same way, but I knew what he was talking about because I'd heard it once before. And then I could get it. But I don't think that strategy works. I think it takes a different strategy. And I think we can learn that from some of our schools of opportunity, who it is our privilege to attend their graduations and see kids who come to school with a lot of things that hold them back to be successful in a comprehensive high school. And we see them persevere with the dedication, the commitment, and the expertise in their profession from the teachers who staff those schools.
Thank you. Dr. Ogden.
Thanks. Just as far as including this particular CMAS scores, there are other timing challenges, but also with any tests, I've known some incredibly gifted learners who have such high anxiety that they'll bomb any test you give them. So I do have concern about making that connection to grades, whereas with the smaller things that don't seem as important, which are really developing that whole portfolio of what you know, that seems, if not a substitute, at least something we could depend on more than just folding in one test score. Having had bad days myself on a test day, like finals in college, and one missed bus in a rainstorm and it's all over. So I worry about that for our kids. The variability of the test itself, like you said, Superintendent Gall, it's sort of a game. Again, with if you have that one day where something's wrong, or you just get anxiety one day, then it's not going to show our kids great work. I think Director Bankus mentioned, not having 20-year-olds in high school. I'm also worried about 16-year-olds in 8th grade. So a school within a school, or whatever it might take to help our kids. A child who is getting Fs in the core subjects might not be getting an F in theater. They should maybe be able to do theater with their peers. So those are concerns I would have. And overall, there's expertise in this room with you all, but we aren't the only ones facing this. Who else in this state, in this country, is seeing improvements with what they're doing? I would be interested in knowing that. So we don't have to reinvent wheels here. We don't have to reinvent programs. What is working elsewhere? Policy-wise for us, and program-wise for district admin.
You guys could stipulate that we're gonna take PSAT 8-9 at the 8th grade level as opposed to CMAS, instead of 9 hours of testing.
Possible even.
I don't think so. I don't think the state grants like that kind of excusals, but it makes sense.
Okay.
makes sense.
I do think that we should be pressing at the state level for the state to push an RFP that says, in today's world, we need near instantaneous results.
Yeah.
There's no reason why CMAS happens in April and we have to wait until August. At
Or that it
least,
takes that long to assess children. Like
right.
it's more resilience
Right.
than it is
Yeah.
ability.
And I think particularly, Director Ott, maybe your role at the CASB, is that correct? Could be pushing that says, I appreciate the work of the assessment group this year, but it still was going on this assumption that we can't change the constant, which is why do we test in April and not learn until August?
Yeah.
Right now, even SAT doesn't take that long if you're a kid that's taking the SATs and trying to get into college. There's gotta be a way that we can get redacted information or just draft and not final. I know the SPF can be more complicated, but it's too distal, which then makes it not an effective tool. Our STAR data is much tighter, to Director Carey's point, but it becomes inactionable for us as a kid goes through a process and is selected a new building, and even as our building leaders go to site-based budgeting, they're not able to build their staff based upon their need. They're building their staff based upon what they think their need is going to be. And then they find out, oh my God, we really tanked this grade in this subject area or this demographic of child or this special population. What are we gonna do differently about it? And now you're locked in because our contracts have already started. So I do think that there could be a role that we start pushing, either asking the state to do this differently or asking for exceptions. I mean, I would be more than happy with that level of correlation to say, why don't you allow us to run a pilot for a couple of grades where our STAR data is our CMAS? And then allow us to see if we can iterate faster to make sure that we don't end up with 20-year-olds in high school or 16-year-olds in middle school. That's nobody's goal. But I do think, and again, I love the analogy of the cell phones. When the board got really hard, they just said, we're no longer standing for disruptions in the learning environment by electronic devices. We then operationalized and came way further ahead than we ever thought we could be. With your concerns in place, Director Ott, 504s, IEPs, abilities for us to manage the small percentage of kids who really can't test. I do understand that. But I would rather have a system where we're finding accommodations for the single-digit 10% kids that are struggling in that space than having a system that is completely abandoning the 90% of which we're not actionable on.
Okay, I'll come to Director Nelson and then we'll wrap up this conversation as we have got two other agenda items. And then we'll figure out at the end of this conversation after Director Nelson what the next steps are, if the board has any directives that they want to provide to admin. Director Nelson.
So I am fully on board with supporting you in policy, and I think I would love to see that take place so that we can set that standard or that expectation by next school year start. And so there's been some different ideas and options thrown out, and recognizing that like the board sets the what and you all come up with the how to get there. So I would ask that you guys come to us with like a draft of a policy of here's what we needed to say and here's how we're gonna operationalize it, and like full steam ahead. You've got my support. Recognizing that this is entering into the how a little bit of throwing these ideas out there, but when you were mentioning that it's not systematized on grading, like it just made me think about the conversation you and I have had multiple times about United and how they teach their employees that this is what it means to be an employee for United, and that these are your responsibilities. And so that kind of sounds like in line with, here's the D11 way. Here is the D11 way that we grade, and no matter what classroom you walk into, the expectations are the same for the students. They know that every teacher is going to grade them similarly, and that this is what my classroom looks like. And I think that's only fair to the kids. And but I recognize it is going to take bravery on the part of the adults. Because, you know, to Director Jorgensen's point, where people were asked to like curve the bell so that there weren't so many Fs, like this is not about a gotcha. This is about making sure our students are learning and that we are equipping them to be, successful, flourishing adults. So even, the thought of taking tests and them not performing well. I mean, as they go into the future, tests are a fact of life. If they are to go on to college, they will have to take tests. And so we have to find that balance of recognizing what they're going to face as they become adults and having them learn the lessons now. And it's hard, but it doesn't hurt as much as it does when you're an adult. And when you're paying for those classes and failing, So I think coming back to the point of I get with tier 1 instruction, we want to have kids exposed to the grade level that they're meant to be at, but then where's the balance of meeting them where they actually are? And so is it that, I thought of Mr. Smith when he said that the average grade level that kids are coming in is more like 5th grade reading level. Okay, if that's where you're at, you automatically, one of your class periods of your 7, or no, we don't have 7 anymore, we have 4 or 5. Of your day is reading at the grade level you're actually at. And you're also going to be in 9th grade level, So, and that kind of gets into the tier 2, tier 3, maybe we are already doing that. My understanding is it's maybe not to that depth or frequency that kids are getting interventionist support, but I don't know if it is every day and to that length of time. So maybe that's a strategy. Yeah, I think that's all I had. So you just tell us what you want and let's do it. And let's do it by next school year. And recognizing that if we are to start holding kids back, I want to make sure that we do have a strategy of what's going to be different for that child rather than just them repeating what we've already been doing.
Thank you.
Okay, so you heard the feedback from the board and the discussion, Superintendent Ron, and looks like Mr. Joyner is taking notes as well as we go along this process. Is this a topic that you would like to revisit by the end of the school year?
If you have thumbs on bringing back some policy recommendations, I think that's our next step, because I don't want to operationalize until I get the policy clarity. I think I don't have the policies memorized, but we'll bring Dr. X into the group and we'll bring a series of them and say, this is the range that we think we're hearing from you. Do you want to ask for thumbs on that, so I know that's my direction?
I will.
Okay, and then we're prepared to do that by as we round out this year, yes,
And
to
that
be ready for
timeframe,
next year.
Yeah, we'll work.
Yeah, in phasing, right, I can't immediately say, everybody's got new number 2 pencils, because it takes time for us to do that stuff, but I do think we should start on that continuum of activating these ideas from policy down into the classroom.
Okay,
If you need like one or two board members to help be a part of that development, I'm sure, ask that next, who wants to be a part of that? I was like, I bet Thomas would.
So I think you have 2 questions to the board.
Yeah. First, let's talk about the policy, supporting administration through policy, pulling that lever and bringing that discussion to the board at a certain point in time around June. Thumbs up on that. Okay, 1, 2, 3, I got unanimous thumbs up on it. Okay, and then as we go along in this process, is there a couple of board members that would like to participate in the development of this policy, working with administration?
Yep.
And probably with Mr. Joyner, and any interest on which board members want to serve in that capacity? Okay.
I'm happy to do so, but the teachers in the group might be better.
I would also be willing from a
Okay.
parent perspective, not a
Yeah.
teacher perspective.
Yeah, we need,
I'll let you send me 2 names,
2
because more than
Okay.
2, then I can get into a quorum.
okay,
and
I
things
saw
like that.
Director Carey, Director Nelson, Director Hafley, Dr. Art as well. Okay, we got to figure out 2 names out of this. so we can
If
keep
somebody
it in a more
really
tight
wants
group.
it, I don't have to, I'm just willing.
think Gary and Haley want it.
He really
Okay.
wants it, but between the three of us,
Okay.
you know, if you really want it.
Oh, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, so Director Art, if they do, okay, great, you got two names, Director Hafley and Director Kim. Okay, and keep us in the loop so that
Okay.
when it needs to come back to the board for the discussions, we can take this. Okay, we are at about 6:15 right now. This conversation went on a little bit longer than anticipated. Is the board okay with taking a break for 5 minutes and then reconvening again for the next agenda item?
I just wanna say.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is continued conversation about Jenkins Middle School, and the board promised update every week during our board meeting or the work session. I'm going to turn to Superintendent Gall for the update and also the next step in the conversation.
Super excited to actually bring the group here tonight. Brian and Colin representing, and we have Bruce and Heather behind them as well, representing both CRP and Brian Construction on the work at Jenkins. It's been an exciting time. It's been a great partnership. If you were allowed in the building, you would see we're already tearing things up on the repairs that you all had approved a couple of weeks ago. And now we're bringing this to you now to show you our recommendation going forward for what we're gonna do for the new academic space. And then we'll be bringing a budget request to you, I believe, next week in a special meeting for us to continue to get off that work. We are moving very quickly. Time is a commodity here. We are committed to partial occupancy starting in August, as we've briefed a couple of times, and we are projecting full occupancy the following August of 2026. And so for anybody who says, well, I missed the meeting and I didn't know, we're moving every week. We are making major decisions and major milestones in order to backwards plan from that August of 25 for partial occupancy and August of 26 for full occupancy. And with that, I want to turn it over to the team. Dr. Comfort, anything to add?
I'll be the clicker, so
No, perfect.
I promise I won't mess up. Okay, here we go.
I'll start. Wanted to give a quick update of where we are. This, like Superintendent Gall mentioned, we're moving very quickly. So some of this stuff is actually started and done, which is all great news. So we have started, we have a demolition permit. We yesterday picked up our repair permit. So from our contractor Straight Line Construction, the micropile permit was, we picked that up for the area next to the art room and the exterior of the gym. So we are off and running. The other big milestone we hit, we started demolition in the media center and other parts of the school so that our friends at CRP could come out and start taking note of what all of that looks like so we can get everything built back to make the fire department, the building department happy for that partial occupancy. We put in some photos here. So this is, the carpet has come up. You'll see some circles on the floor. That's where we're gonna cut out the slab so we can add some micropiles in there to reduce that cracking along that corridor. Some of these other ceiling tiles were taken out so Bruce and team could get in there and start looking above ceiling. Next slide. And then here's inside the media center. So we're still, some of the items are getting moved out of there. And then eventually that whole slab in there will get demoed out and removed, and then we'll come back in with the structural slab. Again, this is all several days old, so this is all progressed much further than you're currently seeing here.
Did you say you were gonna take that whole cement floor out and redo it?
Yes. Yeah. That floor has experienced, I'm sure you're all aware, significant settlement. So we're gonna remove that whole slab, come back in with a structural slab, which means we're gonna add a series of micropiles in there that basically separate our new slab from the earth below it. So it'll allow the earth to do whatever it's gonna do and our slab stays right where it's supposed to be.
Wow.
This is the exterior portion along the gym. The excavation is now complete. The micropile rig is now on site. They're gonna do some test piles to give themselves some data of, putting the remainder of the piles in. CTL Thompson's gonna be there to observe, so we're double, triple checking all the work that's going in to re-support the building. And this is just a quick milestone schedule. I know time is of the essence, so we want to lay out where we are. We're mobilized for the micropile, so we'll start here at 422. The next step is to get some plans submitted to PPRBD for the build back. This is the critical part to get the fire department and the building department up to speed with what our plan is to get kids back in the building. So that will entail bringing up some existing walls to a fire barrier status, which is a 2-hour rated wall. So we're taking careful notes of what has to happen there to get those plans drafted and into the building department for approval. So we've got middle of May, we'll start building those walls back. If we can start any sooner, we absolutely will. You'll notice a couple of spots on here where there's some, strung out durations. Those inspections with the fire department and the building department will be ongoing. So before we cover things back up, as we go through, typical to our business, we get inspections as we go. So that way we're not surprised at the end. It's done, we think we're done, and they're very unhappy with us, and then you all are very unhappy with us, and that's never where we want to be. So that'll go, as we go, we'll get those done, get those completed. What that will do is by closing out that piece of the permit, that'll essentially say, hey, kids can come back in the building. These are estimated dates. The contractor in me needs to, things can happen. We gotta get this torn apart and get this inspected and get through all of this, but that's what we're targeting to get fire barrier walls put back together. The events that happen after that are carpet and paint. We have to make it look the way it was. Kids can't come back into no ceilings and no carpet, so the idea is to put all those things back together. And then there'll be a series of final inspections at the end to close all of that work out as well. I know Jen and team had put in some modulars here, and I'll let her kind of touch on that, but she's going to get that working.
So we've got modular teams that we're working with, and we're just finishing up getting quotes and estimates on different opportunities there, either to move modulars in the district that we currently don't need, and relocate them to Jenkins temporarily, or to rent modulars if they can be built and put in fast enough. So those are the things that we're evaluating, but so far we have gotten positive information from different modular groups that they can accomplish that timeline.
Before we jump off of this, are there any questions on the schedule piece of things?
I think if you could just highlight a little bit about the ongoing relationship with the fire department and the regional building.
Absolutely.
And particularly that this is what you all do for a living. Like, remember, we're the ones that are caught off guard of 15 years of past inspection and then suddenly a failed inspection that means evacuating a building. So we're trying to regain trust with our community that we're not gonna be one rainstorm away again from, because people are like, I don't know if I ever wanna send my kid there. How do we communicate that you all as architects and construction companies, this is what you do. You always talk to them, this is the process, and this isn't some extraordinary effort. I mean, we're moving quickly, but we're building a building to current standards. There's no free passes. It's a safe building. Like, if you could just highlight a little bit about how you do that even outside of the Jenkins relationship.
Absolutely, yeah, we're required on all of our projects when we pull a permit, whether it's PPRBD or Colorado Springs Fire Department, they have to review those plans. So that's essentially the first step in getting this done. They're agreeing in principle on paper that this is what we would like, this is what needs to happen, and if you do this the way it's drawn, we're gonna be happy. The other piece of that is the inspections that happen. So inevitably, especially in an existing building, there's gonna be differing conditions where it doesn't happen as it's drawn. So we're gonna have to work with the inspectors to make sure that they're happy with it as constructed. So it's kind of a double check process. We have to do this on all of our projects, and we do have a great relationship with CSFD and PPRBD. And I will say they have been very attentive to having meetings with us. We called yesterday, we're gonna meet with them next week, we're gonna get an initial inspection, which they're more than willing to do. They're always very accessible for us. We've been in town for 25 years. As Bryant Construction, I've been working with them for 20 years, and they have every day of that been great to work with. So they understand what we're up against here in this particular situation. And like I said, have been very accessible, very able to have conversations. It's been a great process thus far. I know it's not a great situation, but they've been good partners to work with here.
Can I just tag on a couple of comments relative to that? I think because of the outstanding relationship and working partnership that we've had with the fire department and building department, both here in the Pikes Peak region as well as the state, we've been able to come to some arrangements that I think would have been difficult were it not for those pre-existing relationships and were it not for the trust that is there between those agencies and our companies. As Colin said, this is what we do, and we have those relationships. But I think we've been able to leverage a little bit different level of trust with them to accomplish some things that, frankly, they could have dug in their heels on and said, we're not going to let you back in the building, period. And we've been able to kind of get them over some typical bureaucratic sorts of issues that are often in the way. So it's been a very good relationship. And as Colin said, the other thing I just want to underscore is that they have absolutely pledged to be available anytime we need them for any reason, and have been incredibly responsive when we submitted some earlier permits. They reviewed those in an incredibly fast, rapid fashion, and that just helps us to keep this timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking days versus weeks. They're busy down there, and they're helping us out quite a bit.
Okay, any other questions till this?
Get to the good stuff. We got good stuff.
Yeah, we will come to that, but any other questions about the schedule and phase one of what we are talking about? The next step is going to be phase two.
Absolutely.
What you're going to be showing right now.
Absolutely.
But on this part, if there are no further questions, okay. Go ahead.
Well, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brian. They've come up with some great concepts for the new reimagined Jenkins Middle School.
And if it's okay, I'm going to get up so that I can point. So Brandon, if you want to go to the next slide. We evaluated, along with the D11 team, a number of options, and we're presenting to you the preferred option that we all landed on and felt was the ideal solution for Jenkins. As part of the feasibility study process, we determined that the current 7th and 8th grade wing really would have been too expensive and too difficult to salvage. And so this proposal is suggesting that the 7th and 8th grade wing be demolished and that the academic space be replaced in some fashion on the south side of the building, and I'll talk about some specifics there in a minute. We just wanted to kind of show you the context of the overall school site. So as you approach the building, you're probably all familiar with the main parking lot, main entry here, the cafeteria is here, gym is there. This is the current 6th grade wing, so that addition would be built to the south. In thinking about how to reimagine this campus and this building, we've had a lot of conversations in terms of what the academics might look like, and I'll talk briefly about that when we look at the inside of the building. But relative to the outside of the building, we think there are some opportunities to really capture new ways of teaching and learning at Jenkins. So some proposals that we've put forth are the idea of a learning plaza that could have some outdoor gardens and outdoor classrooms that could step down to meet the grades and the tiers of that space. One of the things that was important was having as many westerly facing learning spaces as possible. And so not only would that learning plaza have a westerly orientation, a number of the classrooms on that addition would also maintain that, which again, I think was one of the nice features of the original 7th and 8th grade wing looking out to the west towards Pikes Peak. Where the 7th and 8th grade wing would be removed, we're proposing an outdoor amphitheater, which again could be an outdoor learning and teaching space and could also be a performance venue, knowing that performance spaces in this building are critical. So that's another idea or proposal that we've put forth. Right now, the existing drive sort of cuts through this area to get to the back of the building, and so we're simply proposing that that drive would be looped around to reconnect, and that happens with very minimal disruption to the site and certainly minimal disruption to the overall flow on the campus. One of the other thoughts behind locating the addition here with a sort of a connecting link is to allow the construction of this addition to happen with very minimal impact to the existing building. And again, I can talk about that more in detail when we look at the floor plan. The other thing I'll just comment on here, Jen mentioned the modulars. The district is planning to place those here inside the bus loop, which is in closest proximity to the Commons cafeteria, gym, and some of the other major, more public spaces of the building. So that's the game plan there. I don't know if you want to provide any other.
Yeah, and just as people are watching, the blue squares are for the partial occupancy. And then when the reddish or bronze new addition, which is 2 stories, is completed, the blue squares go away.
Correct.
So just so people don't think we're trying to discombobulate and say that your Jenkins experience forevermore will be in modulars inside a bus loop. That's our partial occupancy to get 6th and 7th grade back there. And then as we open up the new addition, 2 stories there, where the current 6th grade wing is 1 story. So those people that are measuring and going, why is that so small and the other one's bigger? We're getting the adequate square footage that we need to be able to provide for a robust Jenkins experience again. All west facing, all on stable ground, and all ready to go. Even better.
Yep. Brandon, if you want to go to the next. So this is turned 90 degrees from what you were just looking at. Again, to reorient you, the gym is here, existing 7th and 8th grade wing would be there, existing 6th grade wing, and that's the proposed addition. One of the really exciting things for me in this whole process is the idea of reimagining the media center. And as you all know, when media centers were designed 20, 25, even 15 years ago, they were designed as these big, large book repositories. And we know that that's not how learning happens today. That's not how teaching happens today. And so this provides the opportunity for us to reimagine what education might look like in Jenkins and recreate or create it in a different way some spaces and utilize this big 2-story media center. What we've proposed is a series of labs that would be on the ground floor, and then what we're calling a learning stair that would be a portion of the big 2-story space of the media center. And then above those labs, as that stair goes up, we would have a series of classrooms and specialty labs that would be on a mezzanine level above. So if you can imagine that 2-story space, lower level with some classrooms, stair that sort of ramps up. And Brandon, if you want to go to the next slide, I can show you some pictures of what a learning stair might be, something like that. Or here's an outdoor version of one. So imagine that amphitheater space that I talked about, maybe it's something like that. Or the amphitheater learning plaza, something like that. So you can kind of get an idea of what those multi-layered spaces might look and feel like. We go back to the plan maybe. The media center space will be reimagined as rapidly as possible. The goal is to try to have that open by hopefully January-ish timeframe.
Yeah, we're shooting for the end of the year.
So that would, if we are able to get the addition, or the existing 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade wing torn down and that work done, then our hope and goal is that really all of this space can then be utilized for 6th and 7th grade. In addition to the modulars that would be out in the bus loop, of course, the existing 6th grade wing would also be utilized for classes in the interim condition. Once this is complete, then from a construction standpoint, we would turn our attention to the construction of the addition. And as I said, the idea here is a glass bridge that would connect from the existing academic wing to the new 2-story addition, and that glass wing would be, or that glass bridge would be the last thing that gets built. So imagine this is sort of a freestanding building under construction, out of the way, not impacting daily operations of the school, fenced off in a very safe condition so that kids aren't wandering through an active construction zone. And then at the 11th hour, when everything else is done, we knock out that section of wall and connect the buildings together, and now we've got this continuous sort of academic space. And the way that we're conceiving of that academic space, I think we've got some really exciting ideas in terms of how, again, maybe it's grouping classrooms in a different way, maybe it's creating some different environments. Maybe there are some ideas around what we've proposed here, learning commons inside the building that would have that west-facing glass exposure. Perhaps reimagining parts of the existing academic wing to right-size some classrooms there and create some other collaborative spaces inside the building where students can learn and interact in a different way. And I can show you some examples of that on the images if you want to click to that, Brandon. Maybe it's some spaces like this where it's not a media center per se, but it's a version of a media center. Maybe it's spaces like this, which is a genius bar that we created in another school where students can interact with each other and with teachers on a different level and in a different way. Maybe it's spaces like this where you've got sort of the spilling out of indoor and outdoor spaces with garage doors and things that can open up and kind of expand out. Again, ideas around soft seating and different groupings of furniture so that students are not just sitting in rows in a typical traditional classroom, but interacting with their teachers and their peers in a different sort of fashion. And so it's just, I think I'm hoping that we're conveying a different way of teaching and a different way of using this building that's not just repeating what was built 25 years ago. Maybe we can go back to the floor plan one more time. I think that's most of the major components, but I wanted, after you saw those pictures, I wanted you to kind of see again how those spaces might relate to classrooms and how they might relate to the indoors and outdoors. As Superintendent Gall said, this will be a 2-story classroom addition, so of course it'll have restrooms on both floors. It'll have an elevator that will allow students to go up and down, and will be designed in a very architecturally appropriate for the building, but modern sort of way and from an educational perspective. So with that, we can ruminate on the images just a little bit more if you want to.
Do you have any more slides?
With the budget, just
You
to,
just had the budget, yep.
Okay, so we can wait on that, have a conversation, discussion about what you presented as
Perfect.
far as these design options goes. Couple of questions from me. The demolition of the 7th and 8th grade wing, would that be complete by the time the school year starts in August?
That is absolutely our goal.
Okay.
Our preference, and I think the district's preference, would be to have that thing removed and out of the way and not be part of an active construction site during the school year. And so yes, absolutely, that's the goal.
And then the media center work, that is not going to be complete until January. So that can be the disruption to the instruction that's happening for the 6th and 7th grade.
Correct.
That can be minimized as much as possible while that construction is going on in that media center.
That's right, and Brandon, maybe if you want to go back to the floor plan. So one of the things that we're doing to satisfy the requirements, you heard Colin talk about fire walls, fire barriers. One of the requirements from the building department is to physically separate the occupiable portions of the building from the non-occupied portions of the building during phase 1. So we will be building a fire barrier, if you will, that will come across the back of the media center and down the existing corridor to completely isolate off the existing media center as well as the 7th and 8th grade wing attached to it. And so everything else will be accessible and available to the students as we've said in August. That's the hope and goal. There will be this hard barrier dividing the construction area from the occupiable area. There will be no construction access through the occupied part of the school. All of that will happen from the west side of the building. And again, with the idea, we work on a lot of existing campuses where school is in session. And the key, of course, is to completely isolate and segregate the construction areas from the occupied areas. This is actually one of the easier ones that we've done because a lot of them are much more intertwined, and you've got multiple phases that are interconnected, and it's this by I think all measures is I won't say easy, but much
It's
easier.
the best of the bad scenario.
Exactly. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And the way you reimagined that media center when it's developed, using that space for labs and then having a mezzanine level up there, I really like that concept. Just a feedback on that. In this day and age, we don't use libraries as we used previously.
That's right.
So this is having a media center, but at the same time using that space more appropriately. And that's a pretty tall structure as well, so there is room to build in a couple of levels. And the amphitheater that you have at the back and the outdoor learning center, all that is really appealing. Board, any thoughts or comments to that?
I'm curious, for the mezzanine level, how is somebody who is mobility challenged going to get there?
So that's a great
Mezzanine.
question. The code definition of a mezzanine is one that does not necessitate or require ADA access to the spaces on the mezzanine, as long as those services are provided on an accessible level. And so that's why you've got lab spaces that are on the main level, as well as some other similar lab spaces that would be on the upper level. And so we're fully kind of in compliance with how the building codes work by allowing students with disabilities to get the same experience on the lower level as they would on the upper level.
So if there were a makerspace and there's only one makerspace, they're not putting that on, that's up to us to not put it on the mezzanine
We
level?
would not put it on the mezzanine. That's right.
Alright, so it's inaccessible, is what you're saying?
Well, essentially it is, but the services, the programs, the opportunities are fully accessible just elsewhere in the building.
If we manage that.
Well, we have to
We
by
will
code.
We
have
will,
to.
yeah,
Yes.
it's not an option, it will, that is a requirement.
That's
You-
it for,
you
that's
good?
it for the moment.
Okay, Director Banks.
So a couple of questions. It's easier if I point.
See, that's why I'm up here, because I'm,
So this is, I'm assuming is a hallway to gain access to this portion. This is sixth grade. So if I'm reading this right, then we're gonna have sixth, seventh, and eighth graders all in the same hallway, and it's gonna be dependent upon the bell schedules to make sure that they're not all in the hallways and overlapping. Is that correct?
That's right, we have to operationalize around the limitations of that building structure, absolutely.
And because this is so far away from the area here, is that going to impact the length of the school day so that kids have time to walk from one end of the building to the next?
We believe that we can reimagine that space in totality, that it's not, I'm in the classroom furthest from lunch, so I get less lunchtime. If you think about where the seventh and eighth grade wing was, if you can kind of point to that, Brian, you're 20 feet further away
Is that all?
from where that one gentleman, was a math room with the gap in the bottom? Who was that? I went in his classroom. It was a great classroom. He was a good teacher. He's still a good teacher. He's just not there anymore. It's not significantly further away.
Okay.
we actually measured it, and from the bottom furthest classroom in that bottom lower level, knowing what the travel path was, down the hallway, up the stairs, down the hallway, around the corner, it is actually the same travel distance, or nominally the same travel distance as the furthest point in the addition.
Well, and in the original, the school also had an elevator to access the upper floors. Is there an elevator somewhere?
Yeah, there will be an elevator in this kind of central core.
So if it's in the central core, couldn't someone use that elevator to then go to the mezzanine?
No, the mezzanine is a two-story part inside the media center. Remember, the sixth grade wing is one level. So it's gonna go 2 levels on the new building, 1 level for the sixth grade. And then the media center will have kind of that loft, if you wanna think of that, a loft space inside of it, which would not have its own elevator. But the academic space in the new addition would.
Thank you. And then my last question is about the upgraded or the re-envisioned fire code requirements that we're meeting on this new project.
Do we have to put active fire in the whole building, or will we have passive fire and active in the
That's
new
the
part?
question.
So our understanding from a series of meetings with the fire department and the state building officials was that we would ultimately fully sprinkler this building. What we're trying to get clarity on right now, and I'm still awaiting a response, is whether or not a partial sprinklering on an interim basis would suffice, or if restoring the existing fire barrier walls is their preferred option. So we're exploring that right now. We're awaiting an answer from the fire department and building officials. And so I don't unfortunately have the final answer on that. I can I can opine, but I don't think you really want me to do that.
No, but if that's what you're waiting for and it can go either way, then my concern is that if we get new leadership at the fire department, they come in and they say, no, you can't do partial or whatever else. That's,
Well, luckily, we just got new leadership at the fire department because Fire Marshal Lacey just retired and Deputy Fire Marshal Chris Cooper was promoted to the new Fire Marshal role. And so Fire Marshal Cooper is the new authority. And I was meeting with Chief Royal or Sam the other evening at an event, and you know, he commented that Chris Cooper has been with the fire department for 26 years, and he was very pleased that he was able to step in as the new marshal. And I don't foresee or anticipate any change in leadership there. I can also say with a lot of confidence that Roger Lovell, who is the chief building official at Pikes Peak Regional Building Department, is not going anywhere anytime soon. And so I appreciate that sensitivity around leadership changes, but I don't, anything can happen, but I don't foresee that.
I also think that because we're in this new construction relationship, everything will be codified in paperwork with a lot more clarity than I think we were in the space of understanding how we had not really demonstrated strong passive fire requirements in the shifting of the old building. So I think we're kind of at a clean slate now where it'll be much clearer to everybody on what those expectations are.
We have to submit a set of documents for it, so that kind of cements that plan in place of we all agree that this is gonna be the path forward, and here's the set of documents that say so. Okay.
That's nice.
So I was gonna have a similar question, that are we now needing to bring the rest of the building up to current code, and that passive fire mitigation may not be acceptable any longer? And so has that been factored in? If they come back and say, you need to put sprinklers in this whole building now, is that already in your timeline and costs, like the budget?
Correct. Yes, yeah, we've assumed what we're gonna call the worst case scenario. Our interpretation of the code, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I know enough to be dangerous. When we sprinkle this building, we would have to do that based on the type of renovation that we're doing, and the size of said renovation. So we would qualify for that based on the work we're proposing here.
You've already pretty much.
Yeah, there's an existing fire riser in the building, which is basically the line that comes in the building. Our assumption out of the gate was that didn't exist, but there's sprinklers over the stage right now. So we're running calculations currently to make sure there's enough flow in that existing riser, and we can take that throughout the rest of the building. We're working with a fire sprinkler subcontractor to try and work out detailed schedules and pricing to make sure, and we'll talk about budget, but that falls within there.
Okay, great.
And maybe just to clarify a little bit, so under the existing building code that the state has told us we're working with, the work area has to be sprinklered, okay? So if you consider the media center and a portion of the 6th grade wing as the work area, regardless of, there is no latitude on that. That is a mandate under the current building code. So this portion and this portion would have to be sprinklered. The addition would also have to be sprinklered. And so then it calls into question, does it make sense to have, call it 2/3 of the building or half of the building sprinkled and not the other half? And I believe we heard from the fire department that is not their preference at all. We asked them to double check that and see if there were any code workarounds that could come into play there. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be more cost effective to simply sprinkler the whole building and then not worry about the passive fire barriers at all. That's our sort of professional recommendation.
I mean, it all comes down to safety, so if for some reason now all of a sudden passive is not considered safe, then we're not gonna go that way. But if it's still safe, it would be hard to say we're gonna put a lot of money into an additional thing if what we already have is safe, but we'll let them tell us.
Yeah, the building, I'm sorry.
No, I was just
Yeah, the building codes, if we were to build a new school today, the building codes would require an e-occupancy and educational occupancy has to be fully sprinklered. There is no workaround for that, no question about that. And so because this somewhat falls into a bit of a gray area, that's where we're trying to get some clarity and some confirmation of what we are interpreting.
Okay.
Any other questions at this time?
Yes, thank you. I'm curious about like energy efficiencies. Is there anything we can gain here? Are we doing geothermal, anything like that with this addition?
We have not talked specifically about those kinds of approaches. I think that as we move forward down the path of actually designing this, because this is a very rough proposal and concept that we wanted to get your feedback on first before we started to head down the path in any more serious way. I think as we do move forward in this process of design, those are the kinds of questions that we do start to get into. Could we utilize solar or, put LED lights in the building so those will be less energy usage? Obviously, the new addition would be designed to meet current energy codes, which are a lot more efficient than what was in place, or actually nothing was in place back in the 90s when the building was built. So yes, there will certainly be some opportunities for energy efficiency and for improvements from that perspective. whether or not geothermal and other options are in play is yet to be determined.
This facility also just went over a major mechanical renovation to get it to the code that Brian's describing. So it already has a brand new, based on code now, it's all very energy efficient
Efficiency
currently.
boilers.
So yeah, high efficiency, it's a fantastic system. We're actually gonna reuse a lot of the equipment that was put in the 7th and 8th grade wing and do our darndest to make sure it makes its way to the new addition as well.
I think the challenge, if we were thinking about geothermal for the whole building, is that will add extensive time, because it would likely go either where the demoed 7th and 8th grade wing is, which means they can't start to get down into that until that's done, or where the new wing is gonna go, which means it would delay that time. And so one of the things we have asked our partners on is every time we come to a new iteration, we need them to let us know if that's going to impact time. Being done in October of '26 only sounds like a 2-month delay, but that means another massive operational ask for our students, for our families and our staff, that we have done a great job, and Darren Joyner's over there and him and his team get a ton of credit for it, of mitigating that, but I really don't want to go down that path, especially if we are already at a new standard. I don't want to reinvent, I don't want to solve the wrong problem. The current problem is we've displaced families because the building's unsafe. Let's get this building fixed on time, on budget, and get people back in there. And I think we can do that and still be cognizant of what some of those energy savings can be.
And the building got new HVAC system too recently.
That's true,
Yeah.
last summer.
Yeah.
Finishing commissioning now.
Go ahead.
And one last question. We have, for our Palmer project, we've had so much community input and asked a lot of questions for people to share their ideas. And so as with this one, I realize that time is of the essence, but
We think there's good opportunity to talk about some of the operational ways to engage students with community, because those interior parts of how we design the mezzanine, and are those labs or are those maker spaces, we're prepared to take a similar approach with our Jenkins community on that, but we need to get moving, and we need to get moving quickly. So that's why we're not in the much longer ideation phase that we were with Palmer. We are repairing a broken building. We are not just starting over in the same way that we have at Palmer. So they're not apples and apples. They're apples and oranges. And we appreciate the support that we've gotten. And we picked 2 proven partners because this is what they're really good at. And that's why they're here with us today. But we will engage our staff and our communities on how to operationalize that learning environment. We've already started those conversations with the Jenkins senior leadership team, and we're rolling that out in May and over the summer with the Jenkins community.
I just, do they want like an amphitheater? There are elements there that it seems that.
We're gonna ask those questions.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Okay, a couple other questions I have for you, Brian,
Yes.
and maybe I heard this wrong. Is the work in that new 7th grade and the 8th grade wing, that addition that we are talking about, is that not going to take place until the work is completed in the media center in December, or is that going to happen concurrently?
It'll be concurrently, although what I was trying to articulate was that this would be a priority because we know you want and need the use of the interior space of the building sooner. And so I think what I was trying to suggest is that this would be the focus and emphasis immediately, but of course we're going to continue with the planning effort for that in lockstep with it. It's just that you may not see heavy equipment out here day one because we're working on this, being focused on the media center first.
And do we have an approximate timeline for that 7th, 8th grade wing addition, the completion of it? You said
By August of '26.
August of 26.
26, we sure? Yeah, absolutely. But Brian's right. It's going to have to happen in kind of phases. So we have to get this design, we have to get it thought through, and then we're going to have to do it in pieces. So we'll work with our friends at the building department again to get a foundations permit, a structure permit, so we can keep moving. But the short answer is, if it doesn't happen day one, it's going to happen day 2. We got to get going.
Thank you. Appreciate any other, you need to go to the budget slide.
Yes, and before I sit down and turn it over to Colin, I just want to express my gratitude to the leadership in this room for the opportunity to partner with D11. As a parent and taxpayer in District 11, it's a great opportunity, and the team has been outstanding to work with. So I just wanted to, again, express our gratitude and the appreciation we have for the opportunity to engage with you all on this. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for stepping into the space where we need a quick turnaround time and then collaborating with all the various city entities as well. That 7th and 8th grade wing, it's going to have an entry and egress from that wing without having to walk through the entire 6th grade corridor to get there. Is there going to be an entry into that wing and exit?
Yes, there will have to be, to meet code requirements. Yeah, there will be multiple exits.
Yeah, something like that. And then as you develop more design renderings of what that building itself looks like, come back to the
We will
board and-
continue with weekly updates to the community.
Yep.
And we will find a way to communicate with them over the summer when we don't have board meetings and work sessions.
Perfect, thank you. The budget.
All right, this slide that's probably difficult to read is our budget. So we've worked with Jennifer and team to come up with a number of different iterations to come up with a way to get the most bang for the buck, which is what led us to the concepts that Brian presented. So the dollar values represented here get us to where we need to be. What that final concept looks like is gonna have to probably bounce around a little bit to hit these dollars. So as part of our process through pre-construction and the design process is we're gonna update numbers as we go and make sure we stick within the dollars here. So our goal, our mission here is to make sure that we stick to the dollars and the timeline. So as Superintendent Gall mentioned, it's gonna be a constant update of where are we at with the dollars, where are we at with pricing options, and Heather's our pre-construction manager, and she's fantastic at this, at pricing up things kind of on the fly so that we can make sure that we're not giving an opportunity for discussion as things go, but also keeping an eye on the schedule. So these dollars here are kind of representative of where we think this needs to be. I don't know if anyone has questions or additional details.
I'll just kick it over to Brandon.
Yeah, I will add, this is what Chief Odom will bring next week. She's going to bring a contract modification that really represents, she has fancy language for this, but it's a maximum price, right? I think what Colin is attesting to is they're gonna work within the budget that we set. And that is the general concept for the design, and some of those things will change, either based on community feedback or on the cost of things. But we're not going to come back and say, hey, actually, we said it was 26 million, but it's more like 30 million now. So that's what we're going to be bringing to the board next week. We are prepared to allocate this level of resource to the Jenkins project next week. So again, we are, Jen has done a great job managing her capital budgets, doing significant projects. We are in the position to be able to fulfill on this obligation in a really meaningful way. So that's why we're gonna get the budget allocated as soon as we can so that they can start doing their job and we can get kids back in there as soon as possible.
Okay, so what's going to come is 26 million or whatever it is, that amount. Dr. Rod.
Thank you. So I assume that's a special meeting
It is a special meeting,
that we will be
I
having?
believe.
Okay.
Is this coming next week or is it coming on May 7th?
The plan, well, you're the board president. The plan is that it will come next week.
That's the feedback that are we in time constraint?
Yes.
Yes.
We need this approved next week. Okay.
Yes, we want them to be able to move, and so that's why we're planning to bring you that budget next week.
All right, then I would like to request that we include a public comment period. Since this is money, it's not action, I don't think anybody's gonna be coming and telling us this is a terrible idea. They might come and tell us, yes, please, we have to do this for our community. But just for my fellow board members, I have been a little concerned that we have cut out public comment entirely from our special meetings, whether we have non-action or action items. And then someone has approached me as well regarding that, the lack of them. So I just want to put that out there that here we are, we're spending some major money again. Can we please have public comment?
Absolutely, and that falls on me as we go through the board planning agenda. If there is any new item that has not appeared in previous budget cycle, and that is anything that is sensitive where public comments are required, I do add public comments. When you go back and look at special meetings, we've had public comments in the past. Okay, so this is an item that will require public comments and I will have public comments appropriately, but just generally categorizing that we have cut out public comments, I will push back on that. That's not the intent. The community still has an opportunity to reach out to the board at any level through emails. And we've had, yes, last week we had public comments on CMA and we opened that up. We didn't have any public comments on it. Okay,
That was specific to CMA, correct?
Yes,
But
exactly.
there were other things that people might have wanted to comment on.
Well, special meetings, and I'll make it, unless the board disagrees with me, special meeting, the public comments are going to be only on the action or non-action agenda items and not general comments.
Director Ott, if I may, I do want to say we did want to call a special meeting for this tonight. And in respect exactly to what you're saying, which is we're bringing this information in a work session. We want to allow the community time. That is what the board president wanted as well. So it is moving slower than I wanted because we want to get going. So I just wanted to offer that as we were intentional in at least giving a portion of time between when we're presenting the idea and when you guys would likely be
And
able
we
to.
are obligated to the community for our 4th town hall in May. I don't think we've picked a date yet, but we said, I think the week before graduation, for yet another evening at Jenkins to discuss with our, another evening at Doherty to discuss with our Jenkins community these plans and the operationalizing of those, of where kids will be going next year, who's gonna be in a mobile unit, what period that will be. So we have certainly not been ignoring, particularly the Jenkins communities. I'm very proud of the team and the continued effort, the transparency, the number of ways we've been communicating. The website is up to date. It has all this information. It has all these reports. We have Let's Talks from families that do have both concerns and accolades on this, of which we have been sharing and robustly answering. So there has been no attempt to not have this be a part of the community. However, every day we don't approve a contract and don't move is a chance for me to have to stand up there and say, I'm sorry, the building's not ready. And that is not a feeling and an experience I want to have again. We've obligated to being done. Our partners say that we can be done. We're going to get it done. I believe special comments in a special meeting next week are appropriate, and that's where we're at.
Yeah, I'll just respond that, to my knowledge, when we've had special meetings that the subject has not been in a previous regular board meeting, then, and if it is somewhat like controversial or we need to hear feedback, public comment has been available during those special meetings. If there have been times where it was already on a regular board meeting and people had the opportunity to give comments, then I think that might also play into whether it makes sense to have it. So if there is a situation though that you see we have something and there's not public comment, on the agenda, email and say, hey, I think this could be a controversial topic and I think we might wanna add it. But I also kind of think that to just throw it out there that we have restricted public comment is not a fair statement.
Not having public comment is not having public comment.
But
And
it's
last
due-
time, just, I don't need to go and look them all up, I don't expect anybody to do that. I'm just asking that we have it moving forward.
For all special meetings or
If-
when it makes sense?
If there's a special meeting, we're having business and I think it would be better to have public comment on the topics we're discussing. And if nobody comes, great, we can say you've had the opportunity. And of course, they can email us. And I invite anybody to call us, because those phones, we pay for them and we don't get a lot of calls, I'm guessing. But it's just, it seems to me a courtesy to our public that we allow for public comment.
Yeah, we'll take that into consideration as we move forward. Thank you. Any other comments on this topic? Thank you all for coming here and making this presentation, and we look forward to future work and the contract coming next week. So thank you. I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, this is periodic legislative update. We did have Amy Atwood with us last week to give us an update, but this is the time of the year when things are moving at a rapid pace at the legislature level. So first, let's go to Amy to get the latest update on what has transpired over the past few days.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. Amy Atwood, Atwood Public Affairs. I am the contract lobbyist with the district. So we are 2 weeks away from the session. If you remember, it's 120 days, and 2 weeks from today, session ends. There are only 2 bills that have to pass during every legislative session. One is the state budget, and the other is the School Finance Act. The state budget is passed. It is totally finished on its way to the governor. The School Finance Act has been pushed out to next week, not because it's in peril, it just more is a timing issue. So we'll see School Finance Act again next week, and I believe Mike will also come and testify again like he did in the House. There have been 368 bills introduced. 103 of those are dead. 111 have been signed by the governor, which means we have 424 pieces of legislation that are still in play that need to be dealt with in the next 2 weeks. That is an enormous amount of bills that still need to be dealt with. So we're having very, very long days. As you can tell, I'm still here at the Capitol, but they are working their way through bills. You asked me to come back and follow up on 3 specific pieces of legislation. The first one I'd like to talk to you about is the Health Insurance Affordability Enterprise update. I sent an email to the board, I believe it was yesterday, that stated it will not increase insurance premiums. If it does not pass, insurance premiums will increase. So it was the converse of what I think maybe some board members thought. It will not increase premiums. If it does not pass, that is what will increase premiums. The second bill is the one Senate Bill 284, Youth Service Organizations Engagement on School Campuses. This bill was just in committee. It just finished committee. It passed 4-3. It was heavily amended today to say that if a district has a policy for service organizations to either come on campus, if they just have a policy of how they communicate and deal with youth service organizations, they are exempt from the bill. So if the district does not have a policy, then the district will need to develop a policy, and there are some parameters in the bill about what needs to be included. The district will not be compelled to have youth service organizations come in and present during instructional time. That is up to the district and school leaders as to how they want to handle when organizations come in and present to students. Let me just check my notes. And the 2 organizations that are behind the bill are the YMCA and the Boy Scouts. So those are the 2 proponent entities that are supporting it and pushing it. And then the third bill is 1312, Legal Protections for Transgender Individuals. We did receive an email back from staff. I just need to pull it up. Specifically from Deborah Menkins, and her bottom line, is she here? Okay, great. If she wants to go through what her email said. So there's been some interesting movement on the bill that One Colorado removed their support position and a number of other LGBT plus organizations have moved to an amend position. That just happened. It was late Monday or early Tuesday. And so they have not presented the sponsors with what amendments they are looking for. So it's unclear what amendments those organizations are looking for. If those organizations pull their support totally from the bill will have a much harder time passing in this legislature.
Of forms, that's no longer part of the bill. Could you elaborate on that?
That's correct. That was amended out of the bill. So the district would not have to change any forms to include a chosen name. That was totally amended out.
Okay. To you, Ms. Metro.
Sure, and I apologize for including a discussion of that in my communication, and the reason for it was, we did pull the House bill from the legislative website, but it included a reference to the forms in the bill summary, but not in the bill itself, so thank you for clarifying that. But I was asked to look at the issue of what impact, this House bill has on School District 11 in particular. And, as you know, I think I attached a copy of the House bill to my email, and I imagine all of you may have already read it anyway. But this bill is intended to enhance legal protections to transgendered individuals. And it attempts to do so in 3 particular areas, and Amy, feel free to jump in. I know you've been dealing with this a lot longer than I have. The first area it's designed to address is the subject of child custody and parenting time. The bill requires that courts consider a parent's treatment of a child with regard to their transgender status in making decisions regarding child custody and parenting time decisions. Now, that doesn't appear to apply to school districts in any form. I know, when you read the bill, at first glance, it appears that they're equating negative treatment of a child because of their transgender status as child abuse, necessitating child abuse reporting. That's not the case. It's just simply one of many factors that a court must consider in making decisions regarding child custody and parenting time. The second area that this bill addresses is the area of schools. And in the area of schools, it has a relatively limited impact. It affects 2 types of policies that school districts have. One is a chosen name policy. D11, as you know, does have a chosen name policy. There was a law passed last year that required school districts to develop those policies. This bill requires that policy, the chosen name policy, include all the reasons that a student might want to change or be called by a chosen name. Not just the fact that they're transgendered individuals, but other reasons. Maybe they don't like their first name, or their first name is so common, everybody has it. So you've got to include all of those reasons in your policy. And the second impact that the bill has on school districts is with regard to their dress code policies. And the bill requires that dress code policies essentially be gender neutral. And an example of that would be if a school district had a dress code policy that prohibits boys from wearing dresses or having long hair. School District 11's dress code policy is gender neutral. And then the third area that this bill is intended to address is Colorado's anti-discrimination law. And this law is applicable to school districts, so it does apply to school districts, but it applies to a lot of other organizations, employers. It applies to all public entities, public accommodations. So it applies to a large group of entities. But what it does is it makes unlawful or discriminatory, which is unlawful in Colorado, makes it discriminatory for a public school official or teacher or educator to call a student or refer to a student by the wrong pronouns or the wrong, I think they call it honorific title. I don't know if that means Mr. or Ms. or Prince or Princess or what. Whereas the earlier law that was passed last year applied only to a student's chosen name. You've got to call the student by their chosen name, and if you don't call them by that name, but call them by their old name, that's discriminatory and violates the law. So that rule, which was already adopted last year, is expanded to include pronouns and honorific titles. So, I mean, that's essentially my summary and my take on the House bill with respect to with respect to its impact on District 11. Now, one thing that came up is, some issues I've seen raised, by others are, well, does this usurp a parent's authority over their child or their ability to make decisions? I mean, no more so than the previous law did, which had to do with use of preferred names, the chosen name statute. Again, this bill is silent as to whether parental consent can be required, for a school district to call a student by certain pronouns to reflect their transgendered status. So this law really isn't any different. And then in terms of the discrimination piece, like I said, that was already prohibited or by the previous law governing chosen names that applies to school districts. So
Okay, thank you. So any questions to Ms. Atwood? It can be generally about any bills that are on the table right now, and then specifically to Ms. Atwood or to Ms. Menkins about House Bill 1312.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So did I hear you correctly say that it is not considered abuse if a family does not support a child that is wanting to pursue gender identity pathways?
Right, the way I read this was it's simply a factor that courts consider in making decisions regarding child custody and parenting time. So I don't think it triggers an obligation on the part of school district staff to call DHS and report them. And I think it just, if there happens to be a child custody type proceeding, divorce proceeding or whatever, that would be one factor, is how you treat your child with regard to their transgender status.
Okay, because we were talking about counselors last week, but I realized after the meeting that like all of our staff are mandatory reporters.
Right.
And so if there is a family that they have a child that is, pursuing this pathway, and then the parents start telling the teachers they're not supportive of that, does that then put that family at risk of being reported as they're abusing their child?
No, that's not how I read it. Correct me if you, let me
No.
know if you disagree, but that's not
You're
how I
correct.
read it.
Okay.
Right, it's only if there's a judicial proceeding pending that's addressing the issue of child custody or parenting time.
Okay.
That's one of many factors considered, but it's not defined. In fact, if you look at this, the Colorado child abuse laws are not impacted by this.
Okay. And then I had a second question on the chosen name change policy, and you were saying that to have policy, like, does it reference specifically policy ACA, and that we now need to broaden that? Because the state statute last year that passed that required us to create policy ACA was specific to gender identity. We already have like nickname policy type things in place. So if we already, I guess I'm just wondering, do they need to be now combined, or is it like we're meeting state statute requirements already?
I guess I'm not sure about the nickname policy. I assume the only policy you have is the chosen name policy, which I guess is ACA. And I don't know that it incorporates all of the reasons why a student might choose a name other than their legal name. I think the presumption is, and in that earlier law, the policy was supposed to address chosen names with respect to a student's transgender status.
Right.
It was designed to protect them. Now the policy has to be revised to include other reasons, like the examples I gave earlier.
Okay. And
I can add to that too, is that where it says all other reasons or any reasons, your policy can just use that term. You don't have to come up with or imagine what any kind of reason could be. You can just use that term that is in the legislation.
And I'm pretty sure we have a nickname policy, but I do need to double check that, like, before I say that.
That could be,
I need to do my due diligence. That's all I have.
Director Hart.
Thanks. I just wanted to revisit the financial literacy graduation requirement, how that's moving along. And also, are there any bills that you think we should be paying attention to that might not be on our radar specifically?
I think that all the bills, okay, 1192, I just have to look it up. So it is, it's a House bill, and it is sitting and waiting for Appropriations Committee. It has not been put on the calendar for Appropriations Committee, and let me tell you what the appropriation would be. It's $11,747. So anything with the fiscal note has to go through appropriations.
I know we aim to have financial literacy as part of our graduation and have that information, but I was just curious how that was going. Thank you.
Dr. Katie.
Very minor, just to your point, Director Nelson. Right now, what we did in ACA in our definitions is we say, chosen name is defined in Colorado law is any name the student requests to be known as that differs from the student's legal name to reflect the student's gender identity. And the reason we wrote it that way is because that's the way it's defined in 1039.
Right.
So I think under the assumption that this passes, the way to make our chosen name policy in compliance is just to delete that last phrase. And
that's what I was-
and then we just say, you know, any name that you request to be known as that differs from your legal name.
Well, that's why I was trying to figure
Irrespective
out,
of reason.
is their intention to sort of modify last year's bill and modify policy ACA? Or is it like we're already meeting the requirements, if I'm remembering correctly, that we do have a nickname policy, so. What?
I don't remember one.
Okay,
I don't think we have a formal nickname policy.
okay. I remember like us talking about it, like, do we, what
It's
do
just
we already-
operational,
Okay,
so
Okay.
don't think, I'm not aware of one either, a policy. But we can confirm. Dr. Backus, you were
No.
Okay.
I just realized I asked too, but I put my questions right together. So any other bills that might not be on our radar that should be?
No, education, we haven't had any new education bills introduced recently that you haven't seen or we haven't talked about.
Thank you.
And I have a question going back to the previous question, which was, is the intent of this bill to have us change our ACA policy? And yes, that is the intent of 1312 is for the ACA policy to change, to be for any reason. And one last thing is that if parental consent or notifying parents that the legislature did not want that to happen, the bill would specifically say that. Being silent is the message that it is okay to notify parents.
We adopted in our policy. Dr. Katie.
I was just gonna echo that. I just double checked the text of 1039. In 1039 versus 1312, when it talks about, you know, here's the specific state statute section we're amending, they're talking about the same thing.
okay.
So yeah, I do think this would require a change to ACA, but I think the change would be very, very simple. You just delete the part where it says in accord with their gender identity.
Okay, any other questions on this? Dr. Jenkins.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the bill. It defines course of control on bottom of page 1. And it says course of control includes a number of things. It says on line 6 of page 3, course of control includes but is not limited to any of the following. And we'll just look at section 12. Denaming or misgendering as those terms are defined in section 2434-301, the individual or the individual's child or relative. So, and then if you look down to the bottom of page 9, it talks about this being discriminatory. So I look at this as saying, if my child wants to be called a different name than I've given them as their father, it's coercive control and discriminatory and therefore usurps my right as a parent. So the bigger picture we're seeing, as mentioned tonight, is last year it was 1039. This year it was, oh, just call them by the chosen name is discriminatory. Now this year it's pronouns, and it's incrementalism of law to a more progressive government-controlled state that's usurping parents' rights and undermining us as parents, the ability to raise our children how we see fit. So as parents being our number one customer, they're the ones who decide to come to us. They're our customer, they are important in this conversation. So while it might not have much as far as reporting abuse or you're kind of dancing around the, well, it could be a factor, but it's not. It could be a factor, it's gonna be a factor. Next year, they'll make it worse. Every year, it's a little change to get closer to the extreme that they want. And I realize they might be trying to push back on federal stuff. I don't care. I'm worried about parents in this city, in this state, based on how this law is written. Gender ideology is being forced into all of our schools now, both private and charter. It violates free speech. It sets a dangerous precedent by criminalizing free speech and compelling the use of language that may conflict with both staff and their fellow students' beliefs or principles. It's going to weaponize custody battles. If you don't agree with something, the other parent that does gets their kid forever. It usurps sovereignty of other states of existing law. So if one parent agrees with gender-affirming care, gets to Colorado, as long as they cross that state line, the law of whatever other state it is that says, hey, that parent doesn't want this, too bad. That law doesn't apply here. It protects it in this bill. This bill is horrible. It's a horrible attack on parents who are our main customer. It's gonna make parents want to homeschool. You will not be safe raising your child or worrying about what the counselor is saying, regardless of how good that counselor is. You say one wrong thing at home or don't agree with what your kid's going through or want them to get counseling in a different way than gender-affirming care, and you're now coercively controlling your minor, your God-given child, and now you're up to whatever else this law wants to do. So regardless of what was said tonight, I still read between all the lines. I see the track record of this progressive legislation over these past years, and it's only gonna get worse. A little bit here, a little bit the next year, a little bit the next year. We're seeing it happen. We already mentioned tonight. Last year it was just chosen name. This year it's this. Oh, now make the law a little bit different. Oh, make districts do that. Oh, make them have a policy for this. When's it gonna stop? This is ridiculous. I could go on and on. This bill isn't about tolerance or acceptance. It's our state legislature enforcing progressive ideology on everybody, and it's not right. So I would like to ask that we still lobby. It sounds like people are already pulling support because they see how egregious this is. But I would like us to still lobby with a letter, a resolution, whatever you need, Ms. Atwood, as the District 11 school board, under majority vote, to say this bill is no good for our district or for our community.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything, feedback on what Dr. Jenkins brought up, any from your legal perspective?
No, I think Director Jorgensen's looking at the bigger picture and the fact that parents are your customers.
Okay.
And this impacts your customers.
Ms. Atwood, have any other school districts taken a position on this bill since the last time we talked? Okay.
Great, we get to lead the charge in this too.
Great.
I mean, here's why I wanna make sure I understand that if it is that parents could be accused of abuse or based on not agreeing with a path that a child wants to go down, and if it's our staff that are required to be mandatory reporters, and then, so that's where I would see us advocating, like sending a letter being like, this impacts how we operate as an employer of mandatory reporters. And just, so that's where I'm trying to like understand, reading between the lines, and so just, I'm verbally processing right now. That's all I got.
Becca.
Just this portion, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but this portion that you're objecting to is not a district, it's not something we're responsible for. And if we decide and wait to weigh in on this one, that there's kind of a, I don't want to say an unspoken rule or barrier of any kind, but that opens up so many options to what we might take positions on that aren't related to education specifically and what our district business is about educating our kids. So I don't think that we should go there. I don't think we need to be weighing in on the legislation that doesn't have to do with educating the kids. It is pure ideology, but it's going both ways. And I mean, if we wanna do things like that, to me, like, we should have licensing of guns a little bit more or something, because it's killing our kids. And it's my right to send my kid to a safe school where people aren't gonna come and shoot them. So, being on those things, there's so many things that we could go down that path. This is not where we belong. And I think we need to step back and not weigh in on this particular bill for that reason. And for the policy itself, if it does pass, in a way, it's making it more equitable. You know, everybody has the same rule. It's not just for transgender kids having to get parental consent, it's all kids. It's some equality and equity right there. But yeah, I can't go along with us weighing in on sections of bills that are not related to our district and our education of our kids.
Good. Any other thoughts or comments?
I have a question about, so I did misgender somebody last year at a program. And after they explained to me their exhibit and all that, I said, well, thank you, ladies. And I started to walk away, and they said, we're boys. So where in this am I being held responsible? And so I apologized, but I mean, I did make the mistake. Oops.
Were these students?
I don't think you are.
Pardon me?
They were students?
Oh, yeah, our
Okay,
kids.
okay.
In somebody's whatever, but I misgendered them.
The reality is, if you come back and you continue to misgender them and you do it on purpose, that's the problem. That's where you're getting into the anti-discrimination or the discrimination. That's my understanding. But you made an
Your
honest
parents saying,
mistake.
no, Rebecca, you're Rebecca, not Robert. And the next day, I want to be Robert. No, you're not a Robert, you're a Rebecca. That's the pattern that you're gonna get in trouble for as a parent, based on how this sits.
Actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was taken out of the bill. It's in section 8. And it now specifically says, this subsection does not prevent a public entity from using an individual's legal name when required to do so by law to ensure that the identity of the individual can be verified, or that other information pertaining to the individual that is needed for legal or other legitimate public purposes can be obtained. But the original language in the bill, that's it, that what I just read is in the amended version. The original bill also said that dead naming purposefully and with the intent to disregard the individual's gender identity or gender expression, refer to an individual than their chosen name. Now that has been, I believe that's been removed. It's certainly out of the definition section. But the original bill said it is purposefully and with the intent to disregard the individual's gender identity. That was in the original bill. It's not in this bill or in the amended version.
New section 7, just like one page. It's there you go.
Oh, there you go. Yep. And so it's B, subsection B. So if you look under definitions, go up to 24-34301. It was moved sections. Thank you. So what I just read you is now in definitions on 5.5A. And then for purposes of this section towards the bottom of the page, repeatedly referring to an individual using an honorific or pronoun that conflicts with the individual's gender identity or gender expression while on notice that said honorific or pronoun conflicts with the individual's gender identity or gender expression is evidence of the intent required by this subsection. So it's repeatedly referring. It's not just an accident.
Misgender refers to purposefully and with the intent to disregard the individual's gender identity. So you're right, it is kind of used throughout there. I think 4 times on that one page.
It is, yeah. And I just want to go back to what does honorific mean? Here at the legislature, we have a transgender representative, and members of the legislature intentionally call her Mr. and use the pronoun he every day. So that's why honorific is in the bill.
Dave, your question get answered. Okay, any other thoughts at this time? And then Director Jenkins still made a request, but any other comments or thoughts at this time? Okay, so does the board then want to take a position on this bill? You heard what Director Jenkins brought to the thing, and then you heard a counter from Director Hart as well as to this doesn't pertain to the and the school district, and you heard from Deb Jenkins as well. Any thoughts on whether
I guess I do have a thought. What effect would a resolution coming from a school district have?
I think that's a good question. I think
is it just a letter that comes from us?
that's a good question. Okay, those are 2 different questions. So taking an official position on the bill, then that is what gives me permission to go and lobby the bill for the position that you're choosing. So taking an official position today is then what I take to legislators to lobby for or against the bill. Resolutions or letters are not as effective, particularly at this time of year. And getting other districts to sign on to that resolution, which we've seen it recently. We just don't have the time to do that, and with only 2 weeks left.
Thank you. I think that helps, because there's a difference between a conversation with you and voting members of the legislature who's going to present our position, and a resolution that goes up and gets read or passed around or whatever. So it's in the Senate now. Is it being heard? Is it being passed? What's its status again? I forgot what you said.
It is. Yeah, so it's moved over to, hold on, I gotta move my screen. I got 2 screens going here. It was introduced and assigned to the Senate yesterday. So it's just been assigned to Judiciary Committee. It hasn't been put on the calendar for Judiciary Committee. It's Wednesday. We're not going to see it in Judiciary tomorrow, particularly because those other interest groups have changed their position to amend. There needs to be time to figure out what those amendments are. So Judiciary meets it'll meet next week. Early next week. It'll meet Monday or Tuesday.
So we need to ask you to ask for a vote for a formal stance on it?
Not a vote.
Or not a vote, ask for a majority.
Yeah, and what I heard from you is the board can provide feedback to you verbally at this time through a thumbs up, and then that would give you the authority to advocate on behalf of the board.
That's correct, and I would also register that position with the Secretary of State, so that position is made public.
Okay. Okay, with that, what she stated in mind, does the board want to take a position on this bill? And I'll state my position on it. I also am concerned about how this is usurping parental authority. And fundamentally, I disagree with the content of this bill. Having said that, if it doesn't have a direct impact on school districts, should we be taking a position on it and set the precedent that we are going to take stances on bills that have no relevance, if any, to school districts? That's my only question, but that's the board questions to answer.
Well, there is relevance.
If, personally, I would oppose this bill and I would sign it as an individual board member, but collectively as a school board, is this something that we need to step in? Jim?
I would think that we would take a proactive stance, like Jason was saying, that the law has changed, and then it's changed, and then it's changed. And so I don't like being in a reactive stance. If there's something we can do now that will show some sort of solidarity, presumably against this bill, then I think we should do that.
Okay. Anybody else at this time? So go ahead.
Is a thumbs up giving, simply giving some kind of direction, or is it a vote? Because we are deciding then, essentially voting on a position. And so I guess
The way I
there's
take it,
a-
that we are just providing a direction to her at this point in time, okay, as opposed to if we need to go through it being a resolution, then it has to come next Wednesday. And by that time, we are 1 week more closer to the end of the session.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Which is, so if what you're deciding tonight is to give me direction, I can't talk to legislators without putting in a position. So that direction will need to be either monitor, support, oppose, or amend. So it's really two questions. One question is, do we want to take a position on the bill? And the second is, what is the direction on the bill?
Okay, Thomas.
Two hopefully quick questions. How unusual is it for, so actually let me flip and do the other question first. One question that I would ask is, we have in reality de facto relatively little work to do in response to this bill passing. But this bill very much talks about local education providers and procedures for dress codes. So I don't think it's correct to say that this bill does not engage with educational institutions. It happens to not interact with the current way we do things. But the bill very much ties into intentionally directing educational systems to set stuff up in specific ways, right? So just sanity check me on that. Is it actually accurate to say that this bill does not, okay. So then my second question is moot. It may be de facto the case that we would not have very much to do in result of this passing based on current practice, but it is very much the case that this is a bill that directly interacts with educational institutions. So in that sense, I don't see.
Another way you could say that, excuse me, is that it is usurping local control. That it is not, it is no more than that. It is usurping local control, and we've taken positions earlier in the session on bills that were pushing back on local control and telling the district what they have to do.
So in that sense, I would be pretty strongly in favor of registering opposition to this bill. I was extremely frustrated with the entire way ACA went down and the fact that we had to write that policy to comply with state statute. I have no desire to go through this again.
Agreed.
And the fact that in reality we wouldn't have to do much is totally immaterial to the question.
Yeah, I would also give direction to oppose this bill because it is a law forcing everyone to accept a set of beliefs, and it is usurping local control.
Okay, you had something to say?
I'm just reflecting on set of beliefs and, you know, like things like women should have the right to vote and blacks are equal to whites and things like that. And I think that, you know, people deserve to be honored for who they are. And, you know, calling a representative and misgendering her is just, it's just rude, it's mean, and, you know, does it need to be against the law? Well, I don't know, we could misgender everybody here and see how we feel. It seems like a common thing of respect and dignity, but sure, maybe we can't even legislate that. I do wanna double check for advice if we are okay with making this sort of decision in a work session to oppose. So I'll give you a moment to think about that. And I'm gonna ask, if you wanna go down this route, do you want, instead of opposing the entire thing, do you want to amend? That would be another option you would have. Because if there are certain things dropped out, would you be okay with that?
There's nothing good in this bill.
However, if you're gonna cite one reason when really there's another reason you are disagreeing with it, I don't know, I think you ought to stand up for what you're really believing and.
I've been pretty clear tonight.
Yeah, you did. Okay, but others might choose to cite different reasons, which might not be.
That's wonderful, that's why there's 7 of us.
So, Deb, sorry to put you on the spot,
Well, it's kind of hard to be put on the spot at
Yeah.
to give legal advice at an open meeting, so.
Okay. You can get back to us if necessary. I don't want to put you on the spot. as far
Let's
as
have the
providing
option to do what's right and just get this done.
I mean, I think like we as a school board have work sessions where we give direction to staff on which way we want to go, like what direction to move in. So that's how we've been operating. So I believe that it would be okay to give direction to a staff, we've paid her, she's our employee, to move in a direction to represent us. But if you research and find out that is not legal, like, we don't wanna go down that path. We wanna do this right, we wanna do it, we don't wanna.
And if you come and provide that feedback, we can act on it at the next board meeting if necessary.
Oh, that might be too late.
Well, after providing the guidance or the direction right now, I'm just talking about if it is necessary at a later point in time, based on her feedback. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that some districts only take positions during work sessions. They don't do it during board meetings because things move so fast. And some districts, boards don't even take the position, it's staff that takes the position for the district. So I just wanted to lay that out there, that there are a lot of different ways that districts take positions.
Okay. Thank you for that feedback. We've had this conversation for quite a while now, and it's time to wrap up this conversation. So based on what I'm hearing from the board wants to take a position on this and a position in opposing this House bill, and that is the direction to our lobbyist in that regard. Would that be?
Take it from there.
Yeah, would that be a fair assumption on that? Thomas? Yeah, okay. That's the directive that we have at this point in time. You heard the board. Okay, keep us updated. I will. It would be good to schedule you again next Wednesday for the board to provide an update as to where we are at this, as we enter this last week.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we have anything else on the agenda. With no other items on the agenda and seeing no other objections at this point in time, the is adjourned at 8:02 p.m. Thank you.